Survival myths that would actually get you killed. You and your best bro are sitting on the couch watching TV, bored out of your mind. You're flipping through the channels when you see somebody you recognize. It's the British guy who goes outside and drinks his own pee for fun. After watching him squeeze elephant poop into his mouth to drink water, you decide to go outside and test your survival capabilities, and also test how real common survival knowledge really is in practice. Because let's be real, whether you're an outdoorsy person or not, we've all heard survival tips at some point in our life. Are these tips that we've always just accepted as truth actually life-saving? Or could they potentially get you killed? And with you and your friends being inspired, you both pack your bags and head out the door for the adventure of a lifetime, not knowing whether or not this would be your last adventure. You were just dropped in an extremely remote location by a helicopter. And as you watch the helicopter fly off, you and your friend are now completely alone, left to your own devices, and your sole goal is to survive and make it home using only the knowledge that you've heard in passing. Before you and your friend can even take your first steps, you need to first understand what direction should you go. And before you could even think, your friend says, "Why don't we go north?" And while you agree, you have a question. How do we know which way is north? But luckily, everybody knows if you want to know which direction is north, all you have to do is find a tree with moss on it, because moss will only grow on the north side of the tree. So you and your friend begin walking until you notice a tree that has moss growing on the bottom of it. And as you approach the tree, that you can see that the moss is in your direction, meaning that if you just do a 180 and start turning around, you'll be going north. Although, just to be sure, you take a quick look around the tree and realize that there isn't only moss on the north side, there's moss on the north, south, east, and west side. This tree trunk is completely covered in moss, and it's not the only one. All of these tree trunks have moss all over them, meaning that you have no idea which way is north, and also debunking this myth that moss is somehow a compass. But this myth isn't just straight out of a fairy tale. There is some basis of reality here, although it's just not fully accurate or reliable at all. According to Michigan State University, it is more likely for moss to grow more prominently on the north side of trees and rocks, although moss can grow basically anywhere, meaning that if you are using moss to navigate, you are setting yourself up for failure, and in a survival situation, setting yourself up for your own possible demise. And while I like organic stuff as much as the next person, I'm gonna stick to my GPS, or at least my compass, when it comes to navigation. Feeling slightly foolish and a bit betrayed, you and your friend decide to confirm which direction is north with your compass and begin moving. So far, this walk is pleasant, and the forest that you guys are in is beautiful and lush, and the steps begin to fly by, and you and your friend are almost lost in conversation when your friend realizes something utterly terrifying. Because the vegetation on the ground is so lush, it's almost impossible to see what's lurking around your feet. And while your friend wasn't looking down, a venomous snake was able to slither onto his boot, up his pant leg, and wrap around your friend's thigh. But the snake didn't just end there. This snake, straight out of Data University, decided to bite your friend directly on the crotch. And by the time you even noticed the snake wrapped around your friend's leg, it was too late, and your friend was screaming in agony. Fortunately, you were able to quickly grab the snake and throw it off into the wilderness. But now you are left with a massive problem. Your friend has just been bitten by a venomous snake. But fortunately, he has a survival tip. It's common knowledge that when somebody receives a venomous snake bite, the best thing to do is immediately suck out the venom, right? It's only logical. The entry wound is still fresh. If you can pull the toxins directly out of the wound, you're only dealing with a small cut and not any venom being directly injected into your bloodstream. It's perfectly logical. And although the placement may be a bit unfortunate, you'd be willing to help your friend out if it was life or death. But in reality, this practice wouldn't be helpful at all. And here's how. Like I mentioned, it may seem initially logical that you would want to remove the venom by any means possible. And some people have even suggested that you should cut the injection site of the fang to make it bigger to be able to suck out more venom. But the reality is this. Once a snake has bitten its victim, there is no way for you to suck out any meaningful amount of venom. And if you were to cut the bite location, you would only be making the wound bigger, causing a higher chance of infection. Speaking of infection, putting your bacteria-ridden mouth on your friend's fresh wound is only going to increase the chances of introducing bacteria directly into your friend's fresh wound. And while it is possible to suck out a small amount of venom, it is not going to be a large enough amount to save your friend's life. However, it could be a large enough amount to cause yourself serious bodily harm or potentially even death as well. So yeah, even though your friend was extremely keen on you removing the venom out of his wound the good old-fashioned way, you luckily both had access to Google just for this brief amount of time, and you were able to confirm that this practice was outdated and potentially deadly and fatal to both of you. And the best course of action would be to limit your friend's mobility. This way, the venom would travel through your friend's body as slowly as possible, giving you the maximum amount of time to get antidote before things got fatal. However, due to plot armor, you had antidote on you and you were able to heal your friend without doing doing any sort of mouth-to-wound suction. After you administer the antidote and you allow your friend to bandage himself up, you both continue on your trek through the woods, feeling better and grateful to be alive, but also feeling more betrayed, because so far, everything you thought you knew was wrong. But before you and your friend could continue to complain about how crazy that entire ordeal was, you run into a much bigger problem. A 750-pound problem that's looking you right in the face. This problem is an adult, aggressive black bear. Your first instinct is to run the opposite way, but before you can even turn, your friend whips his arm around and clenches your arm tightly, holding you in your place. You look your friend in the eye and he tells you, "Are you crazy, man? We can't run away. We have to act like we're already dead." And with your friend's iron grip being on your arm, you have no other option but to lay down beside him. And now the both of you are laying on the ground with a 750-pound black bear slowly approaching your position. You and your friend at this point may be feeling like you just saved your lives. You outsmarted the black bear, and in a few minutes you'll be back well on your way. But in reality, you just made the black bear's life a lot easier and served him up 2 meals on a silver platter. I think most of us at some point have heard, if you see a bear, just play dead. But I think at this point, hopefully most people know that there is definitely some nuance to that. Specifically, that advice does not apply to all bears. Black bears, for example, do not take well to people playing dead. And this is exactly why the bear is currently shaking your friend in his mouth like a dog that just got a new chew toy. Black bears are notoriously aggressive, and if you encounter one, your best course of action is 1, slowly retreat if it doesn't notice you, but if it is fixated on you, your best next steps are to get as big and aggressive as possible. Obviously, you can't fight this bear, but you want to make this bear believe that it's not even worth fighting you. You want to extend your arms and legs outward, look big as possible, yell, sound aggressive, do anything to intimidate this bear, and if you're convincing enough, you may even scare the bear in this process. Grizzly bears, on the other hand, are a bit different. Experts say that grizzly bears respond better if you actually do lay down on the ground, although it's best if you protect your neck just in case and remain still until the bear checks you out and hopefully leaves you alone. And if you happen to end up in a situation where you're face to face with a polar bear, your best bet is to pray. Because polar bears are like black bears, but worse. They are the most aggressive and the most likely to tear your head off. So yeah, although the advice of playing dead around a bear isn't fully inaccurate, it, once again, definitely requires some additional context. The current popular saying is, if it's brown, lay down, if it's black, fight back, and if it's white, good night. Not because you're supposed to play dead, but because you're going to be dead. As you continue to lay motionless on the ground, you peek open one of your eyes to see what's going on. You notice that the black bear has dropped your friend and was distracted by something else, and luckily left you both alone. Your friend, while a little bit worse for wear, is still alive, and you help get him back on his feet, and you once again continue your journey. Feeling a bit bad for your friend, because at this point it looks like he survived 3 rounds with Mike Tyson, 4 days with Diddy, and 5 nights at Freddy's, you decide you would let him take a quick breather and go around gathering some food. Your friend sits down on a rock under a tree, and you decide to go and see what you can find. And once you begin wandering around looking, you realize one crucial thing. You have no idea what's edible or not, and you don't even know what's around you, but that doesn't stop you from looking. And quickly you find yourself approaching some interesting red mushrooms. Now, you know mushrooms can definitely be questionable, but the fact that you see a little snail munching away at these gives you hope. And as you pick these mushrooms, you notice that there's actually small bite marks from chipmunks. This gives you all the confidence you need to pick a few mushrooms and put them in your pocket and to continue scavenging. You continue looking around when you notice a small bush with inconspicuous red berries. You've never seen these berries before, but it doesn't mean that you can't eat them. And while you're cautious of these mysterious red berries, you notice a small bird fly down into this bush and carefully eat these berries before flying away. And once again, you rationalize with yourself, well, if this animal can eat this, obviously I can. If something was poisonous to them, they wouldn't eat it. So you go ahead and collect some of these berries as well. And you notice that you've been scavenging for hours, so you decide to return to your friend and show him your loot. Your friend doesn't seem too enthused by the small handful of random mushrooms and red berries, but something is better than nothing. And you and your friend begin to munch on the world's weirdest trail mix. Feeling energized from the food and also feeling energized mentally that you finally had some knowledge that was true, you and your friend both have a bit more of a pep in your step because you knew that you had at least some right information, right? That is until you realize your friend is looking in 2 directions and he is foaming at the mouth. In shock, you try to say something to him when all you can get out is a jumbled mess of slurred words, and you and your friend both pass out face down on the forest floor. The survival technique of eating what animals ate failed you both. And the reality is, animals are just better than you. And just because the animal can eat it doesn't mean you can eat it at all. Just think about it. Every animal has developed its own unique way of digestion, and the things that our bodies are able to safely process and consume typically come from thousands and thousands of years of consumption. And on top of this, some animals are just built different. Like cows, for example, they have 4 stomachs, and every animal processes the same foods differently. The bird that ate those red berries, for example, was able to pass the toxic seeds from those berries directly through its digestive system without any issues. And those seeds that are now a part of its excrement are now replanted and continuing the life cycle of those berries. But in your case, those seeds have been cracked open by your teeth and are now infecting your entire body with deadly toxins. And the chipmunk that was taking bites out of that small red mushroom has a specialized stomach acid that can neutralize the toxins within this deadly mushroom. However, you simply do not have the facilities to handle that. And the same mushroom that gives that chipmunk life gave you and your friend a near-death experience. Just because you saw an animal eating something does not mean it's not deadly for you. After a few hours being passed out on the floor, you and your friends slowly come to and pick yourselves up off the ground. Nonetheless, you and your friend decide it's time to get serious because the sun is soon setting and you guys need to eat food. You and your friend notice something fuzzy in the distance, and as you slowly approach it and peek over some bushes, you see a lonely old caribou walk slowly until it collapses right before your eyes. And while this is an unfortunate sight for you and your friend, this could be life or death. And in this instance, having an endless supply of high quality food in front of you is something you and your friend couldn't have even imagined. You both approach the caribou to ensure that it's no longer with you. And once you have that confirmation, you begin to prepare the animal. Fortunately, for once, you were able to put useful knowledge to good use. And shortly after preparing the animal, you and your friend are sitting at a campfire under a tree, under the stars, eating your first meal in what feels like forever. But as good as having a hearty meal feels, and as confident as you feel knowing you have a nearly endless supply of food, the reality is that you're not set for food at all. And while you might not realize it now, in the near future, eating this food alone could easily kill you. And the reason is simple but interesting. And it all comes down to biology. Your body simply can't digest protein without fat. And if your diet only consists of protein with no other micronutrient, your body could literally starve or develop protein poisoning. The term for this situation is called rabbit starvation, or the French-Canadian term caribou sickness. But they both refer to the protein poisoning I just mentioned. But the reality is if you are only eating direct, big game, lean protein, you are setting yourself up for failure. And it's because of this very real caribou sickness that beavers were extremely valuable to North American indigenous people, because beavers had such high amounts of fat, which is why beaver hunting and trapping was so important, not just for pelts, but also for fat, so that this fat could be consumed, allowing your body to properly digest the protein from the big game you also caught. Black bears are also a great source of animal fats, although it's much easier to trap a beaver than a black bear, for reasons we discussed earlier. But yeah, if you tried to live solely off of a big game carcass, you would soon find yourself suffering from a strange form of starvation, simply because your body needs protein, but it also needs other macronutrients to properly absorb and process this protein. Luckily for you and your friend, you're both blissfully ignorant to this fact, and you wouldn't be eating off this carcass for long enough to experience these symptoms. And after both of you have successfully filled your bellies, you decide that it's time to get some rest. You suggest to your friend that maybe you guys should build a quick shelter, just something to keep you guys safe. But your friend tells you that that's a waste of time and energy, and that you guys need to conserve your calories as much as possible right now. And you both simply lay down on the ground and close your eyes to sleep. But that sleep isn't peaceful at all. And only a few hours into your sleep, you wake up freezing cold, colder than the air temperature outside, and you're kind of at a loss. And the reason is rather simple. Laying directly on cold ground is a great way to rapidly reduce your body heat. Literally because the ground is stealing heat from your body and lowering your core body temperature, causing you to burn more calories to try to heat yourself back up, while also absorbing all of the extra heat that your body is generating. So in a cold environment like the one that you're in at night, you could not only lose body heat, but also experience hypothermia just by laying on the bare ground, which is why you'll see outdoorsy people swear by a ground mat. Consider it insulation to keep your body heat within you and not being stolen by the ground beneath you. And now that you understand that collecting debris to lay on is a worthy investment of calories, you quickly put together a bundle of grass and leaves to make something soft, but also to make something to insulate your body heat. And you make a makeshift mattress that's large enough for both you and your friend. And you roll your friend onto it, you lay beside him, conserving body heat, and you close your eyes and experience your first bit of rest. The following morning, you decide it's time to start your day and continue your adventure. You begin to inform your friend about last night's discovery and how sleeping on the ground is not okay. But before you can even finish making your point, your friend stops you and points ahead. Because what stands in your way is something you haven't noticed until now. A massive snow-capped mountain. And there's no way around it. You and your friend now need to begin hiking. Luckily, you and your friend are energized from a good night's sleep and at least some sort of food that doesn't almost kill you. And as you and your friend begin to climb through this mountain, the temperatures begin to get lower and lower. And it's at this point when you're able to make the point to your friend that body temperature is something you guys need to keep in mind in these survival situations. But as your friend brushes off your concern about body temperature, he tells you the only thing you guys should be concerned about right now is water. You begin to get nervous because now that you're halfway up this mountain and surrounded by snow, there's no water around you, but your friend laughs at you and reminds you that this snow is water. He grabs a handful of snow off the ground, which appears to be untouched, and begins to chow down on his solid water. And while to most this seems completely safe and logical, this is definitely not the most ideal way to consume water. The first risk that this poses is that this snow or ice could actually cause micro tears or cuts in your mouth, which could definitely cause problems down the line. But more importantly than that, consuming ice directly is a surefire way to lower your core body temperature, causing your body to work overtime to heat itself back up. Your friend may think that body temperature isn't an important ordeal, but you know that it's nothing to laugh at. And at this very moment, hypothermia is a much bigger risk to you than being dehydrated. But unfortunately, your friend is in a bit of a pickle. Because yeah, he was able to hydrate himself through all of the snow he just ate, but he's now shivering uncontrollably and he's hungrier than he was yesterday because his core body temperature has been lowered and his body is consuming as much calories as it can to heat itself back up. Now, you're thirsty as well, but you're not willing to go through that entire experience. And what you do is a lot more wise. You remember watching the Outdoor Boys YouTube channel, and luckily you had the same supplies that he did. You scoop up snow into some sort of metal tin, you put it over top of a propane heater, and you allow the snow to melt, and then you consume the pre-melted, ideally room temperature water, allowing your body to not have to reheat it once it's consumed. Your body can simply use it as is. And the benefit of using this method as well too, assuming you have access to some sort of heat source, is you can actually kill any bad bacteria. But assuming that's not a risk here, you're able to at least avoid the whole hypothermia your friend is now fighting. After this whole water debacle, you realize that your friend's only chance of regaining any sort of heat is by continuing to move. So you keep on your path going over the snow-capped mountain. Unfortunately, your friend is no longer shivering, but you and your friend are now facing a much different issue. You and your friend are now both sweating, which is good. Body heat at this point is not a concern at all. This shouldn't be an issue. And sure, you might smell a little bit later, but what is an issue is the base layer of what you and your friend are wearing. Before you even left, you and your friends were debating on whether or not you should wear your clothes in a certain order. And your friend, obviously being a bit more reckless, said it didn't matter at all. So he started by putting on a cotton undershirt, a cotton hoodie, and then put a jacket over top that was waterproof to help keep water out. You, on the other hand, wanting to be different, decided to wear a base layer that was more moisture wicking, but still followed that up with another hoodie and a waterproof jacket. Now here's the difference. While you and your friend are still sweating now, as soon as you guys stop and your body heat begins to go down, the sweat trapped in your clothes is going to be deadly. And if your base layer is made of cotton, that sweat isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And after hours of hiking, you and your friend decide to take a break, and you guys experience the effects of this firsthand. After only sitting for around 15 minutes, your friend is not only cold once again, but he is shivering worse than he was before. And like I mentioned, that's because now his cotton shirt is drenched with sweat. And when cotton gets wet, it loses its ability to insulate you, meaning that your friend has effectively put a cold conductor directly on his body, and also effectively removed a layer, making him at risk once again for hypothermia. Luckily for you, you unintentionally decided to dress and act appropriately. You didn't wear a cotton base layer, meaning that by the time you already sat down and relaxed, your shirt was slightly wet in your armpits, but the rest of your shirt was able to dry relatively quickly. And also, as you were hiking up the mountain, you decided to remove layers, allowing yourself to not get too hot or sweaty. And that is the reason why you're not experiencing hypothermia right now. Because as you can tell, getting sweaty in a cold survival situation could be life or death. And a good rule of thumb is, if it's cold enough to wear multiple layers, it's too cold to wear a cotton base layer or cotton at all. And while it may seem counterintuitive to remove layers when you're in a cold environment, if you are exerting energy and on the verge of sweating, it is best to remove these layers to prevent sweating as much as you can. As thick as your friend's plot armor is, he is struggling at this point, and still somehow alive. He is dealing once again with hypothermia, and you guys have no access to fire or anything to warm him up. Your friend randomly asks you if you have any alcohol on you, and coincidentally, you did. You had a small bottle of some pretty strong alcohol in your backpack, and you wondered why he wanted it. But before you could even ask him what he wanted it for, he grabbed the bottle out of your hands and chugged it. After wiping his mouth, he tells you that obviously drinking alcohol warms you up. It makes you feel warmer and increases your body temperature. And while I believe this is a myth we've all heard, it's been debunked numerous times, and it also is completely counterproductive. The origin of this myth is actually interesting and comes from a St. Bernard dog that was carrying a brandy flask around its neck, and this dog was saving people that was buried in the French Alps. And unfortunately, this brandy may help you feel better, but definitely won't make you better. If you've experienced the alcoholic beverage, then you've probably noticed the sensation at some point of warmth. And this isn't because the alcohol is raising your body temperature, it's actually because the alcohol is making your blood vessels dilate, stimulating the nerve endings in your skin. But it doesn't actually increase your body temperature. And if you are in a cold environment that is specifically life or death, this dilation of the blood vessels will cause your body temperature to fall and likely cause you to die much faster than you would have if you just stayed sober. So although alcohol may give you the simulation of warming up and potentially take your mind off of the pain you're in, it's definitely not doing you any favors in the survival department. Realizing the severity of the situation, you come to the conclusion that you need to get out of this mountain quick. And while your friend is incapacitated and breaths away from death, you realize your best bet was to turn your friend into a toboggan and ride him down the mountain like Mrs. Kwan in the Cat in the Hat movie. And in only a few minutes, you went from the top of a snow-capped mountain to a place you weren't in yet. You weren't in the forest anymore. You were on a beach. And luckily, it was warm enough to help you and your friend feel better, and you noticed that you were on an ocean. And this ocean could be your ticket to freedom. With both you and your friend being on your last brain cells, you both intuitively build a raft with absolutely no plan of going anywhere and no knowledge on any sort of nautical construction. Regardless, you make a makeshift raft and set sail, hoping that maybe somebody on the water will see you and save you. After hours of sitting on your raft, you and your friend are once again hungry. And while your friend is still sobering up, you decide your best bet is to look for some fish. You take a dive off your raft and you find yourself surrounded by a school of fish, but you're unable to catch any. That is, when you look through the school of fish and notice that a large shadow is approaching you. This isn't a big fish. This is a shark, and it's coming directly for you. You have nanoseconds to try to decide what your next move would be. And the first thing that comes to mind is movies and TV shows showing you that if you punch a shark, you're gonna be all right. So quickly and intuitively, as the shark approaches you, you don't move out of the way, you simply assume a karate stance and prepare to punch the shark. Now here's the deal. If you were actually going to go through with this, there's two likely outcomes. The first is that you are able to successfully punch the shark and scare it away, similar to the black bear, making it seem like you're not worthy prey. But the more likely outcome is that you extend your arm and have your arm ripped off by a shark and then have the rest of your body consumed shortly after. Underwater, you have almost no strength whatsoever. Like, just try throwing a full force punch next time you're in a pool underwater. It's gonna do almost nothing. And besides this, sharks are ruthless killing machines. Even if you could throw your strongest punch at a shark, it's not going to be phased. Combine that with your lack of agility in the water and the shark's endless agility in the water, your strike effectiveness in even misdirecting the shark is extremely low. If a shark was in your area, you could easily push it out of your way or misdirect it by pushing its head if you had the leverage to do so, but even that is potentially risky. But in the situation when a shark is coming at you with the intent of damage, your best bet is to attack sensitive areas, specifically by plunging your thumb into the shark's eye or gills. Really, the only two areas where you can cause significant damage and at least make the shark retreat temporarily. And so, in a last-minute split decision, you decide not to punch the shark, but to actually poke it in the eye, causing the shark to cry and turn around, leaving you alone, and giving you the chance to climb back on the raft with your friend. At this point, you and your friend have been through hell and back. Your friend more so than you, but you are both now laying on your back, looking up at the sky, exhausted. And at this point, accepting your fate and understanding that maybe this trip was a mistake. And as you slowly close your eyes and take what appear to be your last few breaths, you notice a white light appear in your vision. A light that is so bright and so inviting. And you hear a noise, an almost angelic noise. And before you get the chance to meet your maker, you are hit in the testicles by a rope ladder that was dropped on your raft. And you realize that this light was a spotlight from the same helicopter that dropped you off. And while the pain you are experiencing is unbearable, you realize that you and your friend are finally saved. You both climb the ladder and board the helicopter and feel like you have been given a second chance at life. As you both are flying home with the crew, the pilot asks you how your trip was and if you guys were able to enjoy the park that they left you in only a few miles out of town. And you and your friend look at each other and decide that it's better if you kept your stories to yourself and just told them you guys had fun, but that you wouldn't be returning anytime soon. The craziest lawsuits that won big money. Have you ever been walking through the grocery store when you notice a large puddle on the floor? Although there's no wet floor sign, to most, this seems like something you should avoid. But if you are feeling extra opportunistic, this could be a big payday. And all it would require is you to hurt yourself really bad or to put on a really good performance. Now, nobody gets paid for hurting themselves, but you can get paid if you're in a place and it's reasonably expected that this place will be safe for you to use. Then if it's not, you may have the opportunity to file a lawsuit. And while this system exists to protect entities and individuals, it's not always used in such a benevolent way. Which is why today we're not only discussing the craziest lawsuits, but crazy lawsuits that won big money. Let's begin. Richard Overton versus Anheuser-Busch. In 1991, a man named Richard Overton was a simple, blue-collar, working-class man. And what does every simple, blue-collar, working-class man love? A good beer at the end of the day. And maybe even during the day. And for a lot of people, Bud Light is the beer of choice. Now, Bud Light is obviously a consumer product. And like all consumer products, they come with interesting and fun commercials. Most commercials and advertisements try to portray a certain lifestyle or a certain emotional response when it comes to a product to try to give a product emotional weight in somebody's head, helping promote a purchasing decision. For example, if you're trying to sell a fancy watch, you might put it on a fancy looking person in a fancy looking house driving a fancy looking car. A great example of this is watch any perfume or cologne commercial. Like, there's literally a Christian Dior perfume commercial that is just Johnny Depp playing the guitar with wolves in the desert. You're gonna see it on screen, but that's just what I remember from the top of my head. Regardless, ads and marketing are supposed to be fun and creative and make you feel cool and look cool, right? Well, not always. And in this case, Richard Overton felt like Anheuser-Busch, the maker of Bud Light, specifically betrayed him. In 1991, Bud Light was running advertising campaigns that specifically portrayed glamorous lifestyles, beaches, attractive women, all in association with Bud Light. And these ads, to some, imply that drinking Bud Light would result in a similar experience. Which I guess you could say is more or less not unreasonable, but I think most would just assume that, yeah, okay, they want to make this beer look cool, I get it, but not to Richard Overton. Richard Overton thought that drinking this beer would make you cool. It would give you the glamorous lifestyle. It would put you on a beach somehow, and beautiful women would simply flock to you because you were drinking it. But because that didn't happen, he wasn't only disappointed, he was furious. So furious, in fact, that he decided to hire a lawyer and sue Anheuser-Busch. Now here's the deal. Believe it or not, Richard Overton was actually able to find a lawyer who was willing to take the situation. Which just goes to show that there are hungry lawyers out there, you know, Better Call Saul type of guys. And the legal claim that Richard and his lawyer ended up making was that the ads were falsely advertising a lifestyle, and due to this, Richard Overton suffered emotional distress and mental injury because the promised lifestyle he saw was never materialized. At this point, this sounds like a fake joke, but I promise you it's not. And even if the story ended there, it would already be crazy enough. But it doesn't, because obviously he won money. And while it's not the biggest money in the world, it's sizable enough to add it to this list. Once this lawsuit was filed, the ridiculousness of it alone was enough to spark media attention, causing a lot of negative publicity about marketing and specifically Bud Light. Which is why, although Bud Light would have had a very easy case to win here, they decided to settle with Richard Overton for $10,000 cash. Not because they thought that he was right, but because they wanted the attention to die down, and they figured if they gave him 10 grand, he would shut up and go about his life. And well, that's exactly what happened. And like I said, $10,000 definitely isn't nothing, but compared to some of the money that people get in the other cases in this video, it looks like chump change. And I'm really curious if he truly felt this way or if he just wanted to see if he could get some money. Okay, editor's note here. I actually was just going through and finalizing this and realized when I was doing some additional research that this actually didn't get paid out. Literally, this $10,000 was not paid out. The case was actually dismissed. And keep in mind, this case happened in 1991. Even as far as 2007, he was still doing interviews trying to get this money out of Anheuser-Busch. The same $10,000 almost 20 years later. So yeah, my bad. I wanted to definitely make sure I added this in. He actually didn't win a little bit of money. He wanted no money, but you know what? It's already in the video now. It's a funny story, but okay, the rest of them, they're actually winning big money. And the money in each section is only going to get bigger and bigger. Cleante Peters versus Universal Studios. In the last case, we discussed advertising being too misleading because it was not true to the expectation. But in this case, we're almost experiencing the exact opposite. Because in this case, Cleante Peters, a 57-year-old woman at the time, took her 10-year-old granddaughter to the haunted Halloween house in Universal Studios looking to get a fright, but ended up getting much more than they bargained for. I'm man enough to say that I don't have a huge tolerance for scary stuff. I've never really done haunted houses, I've never really wanted to, and I'm generally scared of most things. So already I feel a bit sympathetic towards this case. But I will say, being somebody who is sensitive to scary things, I know to stay away from haunted houses. But maybe that's just me, because obviously Cleante Peters did not share the same mindset. So here's the situation. The story, according to Cleante Peters, goes as follows. Cleante and her granddaughter both enter the Halloween Horror Nights haunted house, and things start off relatively normal. But then it went downhill fast. And Cleante Peters, specifically what her problem was that there was a costumed man dressed with a fake chainsaw that was allegedly chasing her around, making threatening motions, and doing so in such a degree that it not only caused severe emotional trauma, but even caused her physical injury as she was attempting to escape this chainsaw-wielding maniac. It's not stated what happened after this initial experience, but my assumption is that she collected her granddaughter, left the park, and then went ahead to find her Better Call Saul lawyer. And once she had this lawyer, her official argument was that she claimed that the attraction went too far and failed to ensure safety, especially regarding people with medical conditions or anxiety disorders. Now here's the deal. This is actually somewhat reasonable, and I'm not gonna just dunk on this person for the sake of entertainment. I think that there's a very real chance that there could have been, a person working in a haunted house that was taking it too far, maybe getting handsy or aggressive. That's totally possible. But my assumption is that's not the case, and this is more or less of a situation of somebody maybe being somewhere they shouldn't have been. Clancy actually ended up taking this to court, and she was awarded, drumroll please, $15,000. And the court and jury decided that even though Clancy was at a horror-themed attraction, there definitely needs to be a line in safety standards that are enforced. And with Clancy winning this case, it actually resulted in the park reevaluating their safety standards and even their waiver systems. And whether or not they made positive or negative changes, that I can't report. Although they did pay Clancy $15,000 for being a little too spooky. Kathleen Robertson versus a Texas furniture store. Kathleen Robertson was a young mother of one and lived in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. Her husband worked throughout the day and she was a stay-at-home mother. So during the day, her and her 3-year-old son at the time would go out and run errands from time to time. On the fateful day of the incident we're talking about, Kathleen brought her 3-year-old son to a furniture store to look for a brand new couch for their home. But this unassuming trip to the furniture store was actually going to turn catastrophic very soon. The story states that during her time furniture shopping, Kathleen was looking at different couches and price tags when she was walking from couch to couch until she tripped over an object and ended up twisting her ankle and falling. Because Kathleen sustained such a serious injury while furniture shopping, she sued. But the twist is this: that object that she tripped on was actually her own 3-year-old son, who was running around the store like a bull in a china shop. Kathleen argued that the store was negligent and argued that the staff should have had better control over the store's environment. If your blood is already boiling, it gets better. In court, the jury actually awarded Kathleen $80,000. Not only did this spark outrage in some, but it also caused the furniture store to go under, closing a small family business. But that's not the worst of the situation. The worst part about this entire situation is actually that it's not real. That's right. That's why I refer to this as the story. This popular urban legend of Kathleen Robertson, who tripped and fell over her own son suing the store for 80 grand, is not real. And I wanted to add it to this list about real situations for the following reason. When I was doing research for this video, one thing I found was that there was a very popular piece of chainmail known as the Stella Awards email. It was basically like a text chain copy pasta email that you would share around of the craziest lawsuits or the Stella Awards. Why they call it the Stella Awards is something I'll explain in a later section. But basically, there was a huge email that was going around, specifically full of 7 frivolous lawsuits that supposedly won. One of the most famous fake stories from this email was the story of the man named Terrence Dickinson from Pennsylvania who broke into a house to burglarize it and went in the garage, but he actually ended up getting stuck in the garage, and because he was trapped in the garage, once he was let out when the family got home from vacation, he sued them and won $500,000. I've personally heard the story through word of mouth, and if you have too, you've been told a lie. But that's not where the situation ends. This piece of chainmail with 7 fake stories isn't just interesting. It's actually manipulative, because it's highly speculated that this fake email chain that was viral during the early 2000s was actually used to help lobby in favor of corporations against the American people. Here's what I mean. During the early 2000s, this viral email chain was going around claiming that these 7 real lawsuits won and that they were crazy and wow, our legal system is so messed up. But right after this Stella Awards email went viral, there was a wave of lobbying that took place on behalf of huge corporations and insurance companies to reform the legal system, specifically involving lawsuits from individuals. And because of this perfect timing, it's highly speculated and borderline confirmed that these 7 fake stories was deliberate propaganda to make the average American individual think that juries in personal injury cases were simply untrustworthy and too frivolous, and because of that, reform needed to happen. And even though these insane frivolous cases not only didn't win money but didn't exist, in the minds of the American people, it seemed like their justice system was just falling apart, and for that reason, it made sense to reform it so that these people weren't able to steal from corporations, when in reality, these corporations and insurance companies were only lobbying to steal your rights. I'm gonna get off my soapbox now, but when doing research for this video, I thought this was too interesting not to include, which is why I wanted to lead you into it with a story that sounds believable and also blood boiling, but in reality, it's actually corporate American propaganda to steal your rights. Woodrow Thompson versus his neighbor's dog. Woodrow Thomas lived in a nice community in Seattle, Washington, although he had one issue, an issue that he couldn't stand anymore, an issue that most of us can probably relate to. Woodrow's neighbor had a very loud dog. Admittedly, I also have a dog. A small, little, yappy dog that definitely annoys everybody in my neighborhood. And I'm sure a few of you can relate as well. I say this to make the point that loud, barking dogs aren't necessarily a rarity, especially in populated suburban areas. But I guess to Woodrow, the barking had simply gotten too excessive. Denise Norton, Woodrow's neighbor, had a dog named Chopper. And Chopper, according to Woodrow, barked excessively. But Woodrow didn't just claim that Chopper barked excessively, Woodrow claimed that the dog barked to the point of being emotionally and psychologically damaging. Woodrow even went to such extremes as to claim that the dog's barking regularly reached volumes of 128 decibels, which is literally louder than a jet engine. Woodrow was claiming that his neighbor's dog through a window barked louder than a jet engine. So even though Woodrow's entire lawsuit seemed almost baseless and his claims seemed completely unrealistic, he still went ahead with filing the lawsuit against his neighbor. Now here's where things get interesting. As we stated, he was filing this lawsuit specifically for mental and psychological damages. But he didn't just want money for therapy or earplugs. He wanted $500,000 because of Chopper's barking. And this $500,000 lawsuit was won, but not for the reason you think. You see, when Denise Norton was served the papers, letting her know that her crazy neighbor was suing her for $500,000, she almost reasonably didn't take it seriously and just assumed that this lawsuit was fake and that it had no base in reality, so she ignored it. But unfortunately, because she never showed up in court to defend herself, Woodrow automatically won, and the judgment was the full $500,000. Because Woodrow's complaint about the barking dog was unchallenged, well, he just won by default, and he honestly probably wished he asked for more money at that point. But for Denise, the situation is devastating, because although it was definitely negligent of her to not take action on a lawsuit that was handed to her, if it's baseless, then simply challenge it and win. She would have had a very easy win here, mainly because no dogs bark louder than jet engines. But now she is trying to go through the process of having the entire situation appealed and dismissed. And right now, that is still pending. But even though $500,000 is a lot of money, it's not the most we're going to discuss on this list by a mile. Stella Liebeck versus McDonald's. Remember earlier in the plot twist when I was talking about the Stella Awards, basically the lawsuit version of the Darwin Awards? Well, the Stella Awards are named after Stella Liebeck. And the story of Stella Liebeck is one you've probably heard before. But in case you're unfamiliar, let me paint the picture. Stella Liebeck was a 79-year-old woman at the time. She was going about her normal morning routine when she drove to McDonald's, went through the drive-thru, got a coffee, and after she paid and received her coffee, she then put it between her legs, opened it, and began to drive off. But when she drove off, the coffee spilt, and she ended up receiving third-degree burns to over 16% of her body, specifically her inner thighs and groin area. And because of this, she was hospitalized for 8 days and required skin grafts. Now, originally, this case was more or less oversimplified and kind of written off as a baseless claim from somebody trying to get a paycheck. But after doing more digging, I actually kind of don't think it was that at all. But I wanted to add it because I know a lot of people think it was, and I kind of wanted to dispel that myth, or at least maybe let you make your own opinion on it. Because here are the facts. Yes, Stella bought a coffee. Yes, she put it between her legs while driving and opened it. And yes, because of this, it spilt and burned her. All of those actions were definitely not smart. So for those reasons, I definitely think that Stella played a part in this. And maybe if things would have went worse, would have been a Darwin Award winner. But here's the other side of the situation. At the time, McDonald's was serving unreasonably hot coffee. And this was proven. After Stella ended up suing McDonald's because of the intense pain and damages that her body suffered, they measured the temperatures of McDonald's coffees. And they found that these coffees were anywhere from 180 to 190 Fahrenheit, which is far above safe levels or even what any other reasonable coffee shop was brewing or serving coffee at. And that alone gave Stella's case a lot of validity. But it didn't end there, because after lawyers continued to do a deeper investigation into McDonald's hot coffee, they had discovered that over the years, McDonald's had over 700 complaints of people who have injured themselves due to McDonald's extraordinarily hot coffee. So because McDonald's was serving unreasonably hot coffee, and because hundreds of people had not only injured themselves with the coffee, but also had similar settlements with McDonald's, there was definitely a case to be made here. But this is still really only the beginning, because initially, Stella only wanted $20,000 to cover her medical bills, which is reasonable and also kind of dispels the myth that she was looking for a fat paycheck. She wasn't. She just wanted her medical bills to be covered. But McDonald's responded with, I'm not even joking, an $800 offer. Obviously, Stella was unwilling to accept this, and the jury ended up awarding $200,000 to Stella in damages, which the judge brought down to $160,000 due to Stella's partial fault in the situation. But on top of that $100,000 $260,000, Stella was also awarded $2.7 million in punitive damages. And the reason why this figure is significant is because it was equivalent to 2 days of McDonald's coffee revenue. And with that, in total, Stella won $2.86 million. And of course, she didn't walk away with every single penny of it because of legal fees and taxes, but she still did extremely well in a situation that was unfortunate. But yeah, I wanted to mention this one because I think a lot of people were expecting it. I also think a lot of people are uninformed in the situation. Obviously, Stella was not being very wise in this situation. And although her poor choices ended up giving her great bodily harm, this entire situation did likely end up saving a lot of other people in the future, because after this situation, McDonald's reduced the temperature of their coffee to a reasonable temperature. And they were also held accountable and ultimately punished for offering only $800 in the entire situation. I don't think this was a money grab at all. I think Stella just wanted to be compensated for her damages. I think that she was definitely at fault for hurting herself, but I do think that it wasn't only her fault, because if the coffee was a more regular temperature, she would have not have had burns so severe they required literal skin grafts. James Hausman versus a glass door. James R. Hausman lived a simple life in Springfield, Illinois, but he had a dream. He had the dream of sailing the entire world on a cruise ship. And this was a dream that was just about to materialize, and he was doing it on a Holland America cruise. And today was the day. He appeared at the port, stepped on the cruise ship, and began traveling the 7 seas. His cruise was going well so far. He was enjoying every aspect of cruise ship life. You know, shuffleboard with old people, lunch with old people, dinner with old people, dancing with old people, bathing with old people. You know, all of the standard luxuries that a cruise ship can offer. Until one fateful day. The cruise ship that James was on had glass doors. Nothing surprising. But the glass doors in this cruise ship were automatic. And on one fateful day, when James was walking through one of the glass doors on this Holland America cruise, James was hit in the head by a glass door. As the story goes, he was simply walking through the doorway, the door was closing too fast, and it hit him in the head, causing him permanent brain damage. Here's what's interesting. After the incident where James was struck in the head by this automatic glass door, he was still able to carry out his entire 280-day world cruise. But it's reported that his brain injury left him prone to vertigo and small seizures, which are life-changing. When James initially sued the Holland America Cruise Company, the company accused Hausman of carelessly walking into the door and claimed that the incident was anomalous and not their fault. However, that's not what the jury thought. We're obviously going up in money, so it's more than the last one, but guess how much money he won? Do you have your guess? Okay. He won $21.5 million, which is absolutely insane. And I just want to say, I don't think that James was necessarily being dumb or crazy or frivolous in this exact situation. But I think the fact that such a simple mistake could cause such a huge payout is ridiculous in my opinion, which is why I thought it was worthy of this list. Although I want to make it clear, I don't think it was wrong of James to sue. If the door is faulty or too fast, or at least fast enough to cause permanent brain damage, I definitely think there's a reason to, seek compensation. But that being said, $21.5 million seems like a lot. I think this is kind of similar to the last case where there's negligence on both sides. And possibly this situation exposed the underlying issue with these glass doors that were automatic and potentially too fast or, too dangerous. Maroof Hussain versus the Metropolitan Transit Authority. Maroof Hussain was born in Bangladesh and grew up surrounded by family and friends, but as a young adult, wanted to find a better life for himself. And he decided the best place to do that was in the United States of America. Maroof ended up moving to America, and at the age of 24, found himself as a bicycle delivery driver, working right downtown in New York City. Maroof lived a simple and ordinary life until one day of June 2017. Maroof actually had this day off and was going to another part of the city. Like most New Yorkers, he went down to the subway and was waiting on the station. But while Maroof was waiting for his train, he found himself pacing, but unfortunately found himself walking across some uneven ground, which made him feel unbalanced and caused him to fall directly on the subway tracks, the same subway that he was just waiting for. With almost no time to move and no opportunity for somebody to help, Maroof was hit by the subway, but fortunately did live, although sustaining serious injuries. Maroof had injuries to his neck, his back, his head, his arms, his legs, his hands, and the most severe of his injuries were his left foot, where all of his toes were cut off by the train. But here's where things get interesting. When first responders made it to the scene to start seeing Maroof, they assumed that he had intentionally jumped in front of the train. And because first responders had made this official claim, the Metropolitan Transit Authority, or the MTA, which I'm just going to refer to them as now, ran with this as their defense. And because they were trying to state that Maroof did this to himself, they were pressuring Maroof to settle for only $100,000. Now, Maroof was fighting an uphill battle, because not only was he permanently injured because he fell in front of the subway and was struck by it, but now he also had to prove that he didn't do it on purpose. And I think once again, I just wanted to make the point right here, this entry isn't on the list because I think Maroof's crazy or dumb or frivolous or at fault, but I think this entire situation is very dumb, crazy, and frivolous, specifically on the side of the MTA, and I thought it was still worth having it on this specific list. more or less to have a happy and satisfying ending, but we'll get there. Like I said, this entire situation took place in 2017, and it took Maroof years to fight against the MTA and their bullying and their coercion for them to just take the $100,000 offer, but he remained consistent and vigilant. And because he didn't just quickly settle for $100,000, you know, life-changing money in a lot of circumstances, he truly won big. How big, you may ask? Well, he won just under $23 million, or roughly $4.5 million per missing toe, if you're keeping track. But yeah, the jury found the MTA completely responsible and negligent to the fact that they could have implemented additional safeguards, but didn't. And because of this, Maroof was 5 toes poorer and nearly $23 million richer. And it just goes to show, if a company's willing to throw $100 grand at you just to shut you up, it's probably because they know that your case is strong and worth a lot more. Just look at Stella's case. She only wanted 20 grand, but McDonald's literally only slapped her in the face with an $800 settlement offer. But because of their severe greed, they ended up paying millions because they couldn't have just honored her medical bills for the coffee that they made too hot. And in this case, if Maroof had just taken the $100,000 and settled and didn't want to fight for himself, well, he would have missed out on tens of millions of dollars. So I guess it goes to show, make sure you advocate for yourself, make sure you stand up, and make sure if you're thrown a lowball offer, you reject it and get what you're worth. Maroof was only seeking $20 million, which is a lot, but they probably could have offered him maybe 5 to settle today, and he probably would have taken it. That's still $1 million per toe. Not a bad deal. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I have some bad news. There are so many more crazy, frivolous, dumb lawsuits that didn't win that I want to discuss, but there's truly no time for it in this video. But I'll make this promise with you now. If you guys enjoyed this video and want another video about the dumbest lawsuits that never won money, leave a like or leave a comment below letting me know you want it, and I promise I'll make it. Let's say if this video gets, I don't know, 30,000 likes, I'll do it. One of these lawsuits I really want to talk about was a case where a 70-year-old man was fired from his job because the man had extreme gas and uncontrollable diarrhea, but he ended up suing the company for disability discrimination. And well, that situation is just insane, and I want to talk about it. So hopefully that video gets how you would die on every planet. This is you on Mercury. This is you on Saturn. And this is you in Uranus. What's the commonality between all of these versions of you? Well, they're all dead. And that's because basically every planet in our solar system is uninhabitable. But today, we're gonna explain exactly how you got to all of these planets and what about these planets caused you such a harsh and painful death. And to do that, let's take a couple steps back. Before you died on any of these planets, you are the bravest astronaut this side of the Mississippi. And NASA has decided that now is the time that we embark on interplanetary travel. Luckily for you, NASA has developed a special technology that has granted you the perfect number of respawns to die on every planet and still come back in one piece. Because after all, they know that you're just a squishy little guy. And these planets are pretty crazy. But without further ado, let's get to our first planet and experience just exactly how it would kill you. You're now officially approaching the very first planet in the entire solar system, Mercury. Instantly, you're met with two options. Do you land on the light side, or do you land on the dark side? And although you're equipped with limited respawns, you understand that you have some wiggle room, and you decide to first land on the light side. One of the first things you notice as you descend closer and closer to the surface of Mercury is that you're experiencing very little atmospheric drag. And that's because there's actually no atmosphere on Mercury. Mercury only has a thin exosphere. When your rocket ship descends onto Earth, you notice the atmospheric drag and you feel the resistance. You can see the flames out of the window on the side of the ship. And that's because Earth has a strong atmosphere, but Mercury has no such thing, which already brings us to our first probable cause of death, which is a hard impact. Your spaceship isn't equipped for such a thin atmosphere, and for that reason, your landing is extra harsh. Although, miraculously, you and your ship survive. And you're now on the surface of Mercury. And before you even step out of your ship, you notice that the surface is bumpy and mountainous, and that's due to this lack of atmosphere. Just like how your ship experienced no atmospheric drag, meteorites don't either, meaning that they don't burn up when they enter the planet's exosphere. They keep going until they impact the ground hard, making the surface of Mercury look like an abandoned war zone. Regardless, you press the button, open the door, and you step foot onto the surface of Mercury. And within seconds, the spacesuit that your life depends on fails and begins to melt. The pressure that your spacesuit maintains to keep oxygen in the suit is gone due to burn holes that have appeared throughout the suit. And now you and your spacesuit are melting on the surface of Mercury, and before you're even able to gasp for air, your skin is boiling, your organs are shutting down, and you are dead before you can even asphyxiate from the lack of oxygen. That was probably quicker than you thought, but that's just the harsh reality of the light side side of Mercury. Because Mercury has no atmosphere and a very thin exosphere, you are directly exposed to the harsh sun in full effect. And what that looks like, at least for the warm side of the planet, is temperatures approaching 427 degrees Celsius, which, like I mentioned, is enough to essentially cook you in seconds. But it doesn't just stop there, because not only does the lack of atmosphere not protect you from the sun's heat and radiation, but the lack of atmospheric pressure also means that the boiling point of water is significantly lower, which means that not only would all of your organs fail due to the sheer heat your body is experiencing, but also all of your bodily fluids would almost instantly evaporate. So yeah, the light side of Mercury is nothing to mess with, and the sheer unprotected exposure to the sun would kill, vaporize, and melt you in a matter of seconds. And even if it didn't, even if you were the most heat-resistant person in the world, there's also no oxygen, which kind of just seems like a cliff note at this point, but it is true, there's still no oxygen, even if you could survive this heat. You've respawned safely in your spaceship, and you've decided that you're just gonna wait for night to come to you. And you wait 1 hour, 8 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. And at this point, you're curious if night's ever going to come. And the reality is, it likely won't come for a long time. And that's because Mercury rotates extremely slow, meaning that 1 day on Mercury is actually 176 days on Earth. So instead of waiting a half year for nighttime to come, you decide to fly your ship to the dark side of Mercury to see if that's any more inhabitable. Your ship lands and it's dark, although the lights on your ship and the distant glimmer of stars is enough to illuminate the surface of the planet for you to kind of walk around. You press the button, open the ship door, and take your first steps onto the surface of Mercury during nighttime. Instantly, you're relieved that you're not melting or having your blood boil, but you're now realizing what you are dealing with: a severe lack of heat. The nighttime temperatures on Mercury can get as low as negative 180 degrees Celsius, which may seem strange because this planet is the closest to the sun, but due to the lack of atmosphere, Mercury is very poorly insulated and not able to maintain and spread this heat across the planet, leaving you with almost only two extremes. After spending a few seconds on the surface, you realize that your spacesuit is once again not equipped for the sheer lack of heat, and you notice the cold to begin to penetrate your suit and cause severe internal damage. Your visor is instantly fogged up from your breath. Your nose, fingers, and toes are instantly turned numb and turning black with frostbite. At a molecular level, ice crystals are forming inside of your cells, causing internal damage, and your body is beginning to shut down. You can try to move around all you want to try to generate more body heat, but it's simply not going to work. And even if your spacesuit is able to maintain pressure and give you oxygen, within a few minutes, hypothermia will set in and you will be dead. You once again respawn in your ship and realize that there is a third option for landing, a potential Goldilocks zone. You notice that the daytime is too harsh and the nighttime is too harsh. However, there is a strip in the middle of the planet where night meets day, and you decide to land there. Scientifically, and this is real, this area is known as the Terminator Zone, and it's the most moderate place on the entire planet, which is kind of ironic. Regardless, you fly to the Terminator Zone, you land, and you step out of the ship. The part of the Terminator Zone that you find yourself in is on the warm side, not the cold side. You're experiencing more of the sun exposure. However, it's not nearly to the same degree that you experienced on the daytime side, although this moderate temperature still far exceeds the temperature that your NASA spacesuit is able to tolerate. And I guess that this is a good time to mention, because in this hypothetical, we're using NASA's most current flagship spacesuit, which is rated to tolerate temperatures up to 121 degrees Celsius and as cold as negative 157 degrees Celsius, meaning that the suit definitely gives you a huge advantage over being, well, naked, but it's simply no match for the harsh conditions of Mercury. And for that reason, you once again find yourself dead within minutes. Leaving Mercury with your captain's logs full, you now make your way to the next planet in the solar system, Venus. Not to be confused with Penis. I don't know what happened there, but yeah, we're heading to Venus. Your ship is now orbiting Venus, and you begin your descent into this mysterious red-looking planet. As you descend closer to the surface of this planet, you can't help but notice the sheer opposites that you have just experienced. As you're descending closer to the surface of Venus, you are seeing clouds almost everywhere. Thick clouds at that. It's almost like a dark fog, and the closer you get to the surface of Venus, the darker things have become, which in contrast to Mercury is total night and day, because Mercury had no atmosphere, meaning no clouds, no air resistance, nothing. Venus, on the other hand, has an abundance of air pressure, meaning that your landing is relatively easy and light. But the pleasantries of Venus are about to end. Your ship gently lands on the surface and almost instantly begins to make creaking noises. These are noises you haven't yet heard from your ship, but you continue on. You press the button, open the bay door, and step onto the surface of Venus, where you're met with familiar and extremely unfamiliar problems. The first familiar problem is the extreme heat. The surface of Venus is actually hotter than the surface of Mercury, reaching temperatures of 464 degrees Celsius, which is hot enough to melt lead. And because of this, like on Mercury, the integrity of your suit is compromised, you have lost all air, your skin is melting, your liquids are evaporating, and you are dead within seconds. But let's just say, hypothetically, if your suit was able to handle this amount of heat, well, you wouldn't last much longer at all. And that's because Venus has a very unique atmosphere. Atmospheric pressure is sometimes calculated in bar. And for example, on Earth at sea level, the atmospheric pressure is 1 bar. If you've ever seen a watch that's waterproof, it might say 5 bar or something along those lines, and that just means it can tolerate higher pressure from being underwater. Well, the atmospheric pressure on Venus is 92 bar, meaning that its atmosphere is 92 times denser than Earth's. So even though Venus is a similar size to Earth and the gravity you would experience on this planet is relatively similar, because of the sheer atmospheric pressure, as soon as you step foot on this planet, your body would almost instantly collapse. This amount of atmospheric pressure is almost equivalent to being 1.6 kilometers under the ocean. But not only would movement be extremely hard and your body would even struggle to stand, but the sheer amount of pressure would also instantly rupture your eardrums and force all of the air out of your lungs. And if those things for some reason didn't kill you, the collapsing of all of your blood vessels definitely would. And as your dead body lays on the surface of Venus, it begins to rain. But this rain isn't any regular rain. This rain from the clouds that you saw is sulfuric acid, which at this point is basically just adding insult to injury. Because not only does your body essentially instantly vaporize, but it's also crushed and then melted by the acidic rain and fog that exists almost everywhere on this hellish planet. There's no Goldilocks zone or Terminator zone or good zone on Venus. It's all a thick fog of acid, extreme heat, extreme pressure, and it's extremely not fun. You respawn on your ship moments before the structural integrity of that collapses, and you begin your journey to your next planet. This planet looks familiar, but you just can't quite put your finger on it. You can see white, fluffy clouds from the atmosphere, huge, beautiful blue oceans, vast green landscapes, and vast brown deserts. You pick a random spot and decide to descend. The first place you decide to descend is an island just off the coast of India. You know that you're on Earth and realize that you likely don't even need your spacesuit, but you keep it on anyway. You press the button, open the door, and you walk onto this island off the coast of India. And instantly you realize that you're on North Sentinel Island. You try to turn around and get back to your ship, but you get an arrow through both of your knees, and before you can even say a prayer, you have been killed. And realize that maybe landing on North Sentinel Island wasn't the best place to land. You respawn in your ship, fly back up to orbit, and pick another location, this time on an island off the coast of Brazil, far away from India and any sort of uncontacted tribe, right? You land your ship, you open the door, and you step onto this island to realize that there's no people here at all. You can breathe. You take off your helmet and enjoy being home for once. Until you realize multiple snakes slithering up your legs, and you now have multiple venomous snakes in your spacesuit, and you're currently dying on Snake Island. You respawn in your ship, fly back up to orbit, and realize you're done. You're not going to any more uninhabited islands. You pick somewhere central in the United States and decide to land. You press the map, you open the door, and you realize that you've just landed in Gary, Indiana. You take your first few steps to admire the abandoned buildings. But before you know it, your spaceship is being stolen and sold for drugs, your space boots are being stolen off your feet, and you've just been stabbed for wearing a fancy-looking spacesuit. You lasted a noble 20 seconds. Obviously, I'm just being satirical here. There's more ways you could die on Earth than I could ever possibly mention. Although, if you did want to watch a couple videos about how you could die on Earth, there's a lot of videos on my channel that go into detail about that. You respawn in your spaceship, take a deep breath, and prepare for your next planet. You're approaching Mars, and already you're kind of scarred from red-looking planets, but you know that this planet is different, and you're excited to see how different this planet really is. You orbit the planet, and then begin your descent to the surface of Mars. Upon your descent, you're pleased to see that there is no sulfuric acid clouds or rain or gas anywhere, although you realize that's likely a result of the low atmospheric pressure that exists on Mars, and unfortunately, we now know the result of low atmospheric pressure. You have another harsh landing due to the lack of air resistance, and after the reddish dust settles from your impact, you open the door and take your first steps onto the surface of Mars. It's daytime, and you're pleasantly surprised because the temperature is extremely moderate. During the daytime, the temperature of Mars only gets to around 20 degrees Celsius, which is comfortable. Because of the distance that we now are from the sun, the temperature is not nearly as severe as it was on Mercury. However, there is still a big difference with the lack of atmosphere, and it's kind of twofold. The first issue is the radiation from the sun is still strong, 40 to 50 times stronger than it is on the Earth, which is concerning. And also, when nighttime comes and the heat from the sun is no longer available, the temperatures can get as cold as negative 153 degrees Celsius, which would kill you in a similar fashion as to what we explained before. But because we know how you would die on an extremely cold planet, and because you landed during the daytime on Mars, let's just discuss this situation. You're on the surface of Mars, the temperature is pleasant, and so far, things are looking good. Mars is the second most habitable planet in our solar system, and is the most likely candidate to be a place where people could live, although that doesn't necessarily mean it's habitable at all. Besides the lack of atmosphere and extremely cold temperatures, Mars's air is almost solely comprised of carbon dioxide, which, if you try to breathe, would cause a panic attack and hypoxia and then suffocation, all within minutes. Although within your spacesuit, that's not an issue for now. However, what is an issue is the radiation exposure and severe sandstorms. And the sandstorms on Mars are intense. Winds can approach 100 kilometers per hour, and the abrasive nature of the sand could easily strip the paint off your spaceship, wear down your spacesuit, and essentially turn your helmet's visor from clear glass into frosted glass in a few minutes. But even still, you're not quite dead yet, and throughout the rest of the day on Mars, you could live, assuming you have at least enough oxygen in your spacesuit to explore the barren surface. Although, when night comes, temperatures will drop, and you will be no longer. You respawn on the ship and head off to your next planet. And this is the beginning of things getting really crazy. As you approach the next planet, you realize something different. This planet is massive. It's not only the biggest planet that we've explored so far, but it's also the biggest planet in the entire solar system. This planet is Jupiter, and as you begin to successfully orbit this planet, you realize something. You're experiencing radiation sickness, and that's because Jupiter is extremely toxic. And before you can even get anywhere near the surface of Jupiter, which we'll discuss that in a second, you are going to be feeling the effects of the extreme radiation that comes from this toxic planet. But assuming you and your suit are built different, you begin your descent into the planet of Jupiter. One of the first things that you're going to experience is the strange upper clouds. They're not made of sulfuric acid like on Venus. These clouds are lighter in color and composed of water vapor and ammonia. The temperature that we're already experiencing on the descent is already more than our suit can handle. But you're still in your ship and you're still safe for now. So you continue to descend. You notice things similar to Venus begin to get darker and darker, but more intensely than it did on Venus. And with that, you're also noticing that your ship is creaking, similar to what it did on Venus, meaning that the atmospheric pressure is getting intense. You would think that with Jupiter being so massive, its gravitational forces would be huge as well, but Jupiter's gravity is only about 2.4 times stronger than the gravity we experience here on Earth. As your descent continues and you're looking out the window, it's nearly pitch black and you can't see anything. Light isn't able to make it this deep onto the planet, and the pressure is getting intense. Even just 50 kilometers into the planet of Jupiter will have you experiencing pressure equivalent to around 1,000 bar. Keep in mind, the pressure on Venus was 92 bar. You're only 50 kilometers into Jupiter, and you're experiencing 1,000 bar pressure. Now, if you weren't in your indestructible ship, you would have frozen and been crushed into a ball long ago. But because you're in your ship, you're still continuing further. As the pressure increases and as you go deeper and deeper into the planet of Jupiter, one thing that you notice is peculiar is that it's no longer cold. It's actually hot, really hot. You notice that the temperature gauge on the outside of the ship is over 1,000 degrees Celsius, which, if you were exposed to, would instantly vaporize you. But because you're in your ship, you're still safe and still continuing deeper into the planet. At this point, you're struggling to decide when you can even get out of the ship and if you can at all. Because at this point, you've experienced extreme cold, extreme pressure, extreme heat, and now you're experiencing extreme storms with winds up to 400 kilometers per hour. And there's still no sign of any solid surface for you to land your ship on. You notice your ship reach something. It's not ground, but it's a liquidy surface, and it's good enough for you. You press the button, open the spaceship door, you step onto this surface of metallic hydrogen where your feet essentially get stuck and your body is instantly crushed and melted before you can even process what happened. Jupiter's a bit of a tough one because the deeper you go, the more hypothetical you get. And right now, the kind of going theory is that there is a core of metallic hydrogen and other heavy metals in liquid form, potentially surrounding a solid core, but also potentially not. The pressure and temperatures at the core of Jupiter are unimaginably intense. And in the instance of this experiment, this is as deep as you're gonna go, because your mission was to find out how you would die on Jupiter, not what the core of Jupiter is. Although that mission might have been a more productive mission to go on. However, right now the theory is actually that the core of Jupiter could potentially be hotter than the surface of the sun, which, if true, is just crazy to think about. But you don't have time to think, because you're already on your way to your next planet. And this planet, once again, poses brand new challenges. The challenges with surviving this planet begin with even getting close to it. Because not only does Saturn have a plethora of moons, 146 as of now, but it also has its huge, massive, and cool rings, which are literally just orbiting pieces of older moons that crashed into each other or exploded for, I guess, other reasons. So before we even get close to this planet, we have a game of Space Invaders, avoiding asteroids and moon debris. But because you're a legend, you avoid all of that and you begin to get closer to Saturn, and you realize that you're going to be experiencing a lot of similarities to Jupiter. Specifically because this planet is once again massive, and it's also comprised out of the same gases, helium and hydrogen. So you already know you're in for a world of pain. Literally a world of pain. Since the composition of Saturn is relatively similar to the composition of Jupiter, you decide that you're not going to wait until you reach some sort of core to get out of your spaceship. You're going to make sure that you're deep enough into the planet where it's dark and you know that you're fully immersed within the planet's contents, and then you're going to see what happens. And that's exactly what you did. You begin breaking through the initial clouds, and instantly you're once again met with ammonia crystals in the air and clouds and a thicker and denser fog. Your ship begins to descend slowly, your windows get covered in frost, and it begins to get darker and darker. And you realize that it's time to step out of the ship and see what happens. You press the button, the door opens, you step out, and you jump into the abyss. As soon as you step off of the ledge, you're not falling straight down. You are smacked by 1,800 km/h winds throwing you in multiple directions, as Saturn is experiencing consistent storms that would literally rip your body apart almost instantly. At this point, assuming you're extremely damaged but not killed, your body, flying around and spinning out of control, begins to fall deeper into Saturn. Already, the extreme cold is freezing you and killing you within your spacesuit, and the pressure is only getting more and more intense. But because on this particular day you are feeling extra resilient, you're able to survive these extremely cold temperatures and this wind and this intense pressure. You realize that the further you fall, once again, the warmer it gets. And the pressure only gets more and more bone crushing, until soon enough, your body lands into this metallic liquid surface, and your body is now literally a drop in the bucket. What used to be a human body in a spacesuit is now a vaporized liquid drop in an unbelievably hot core of a gas giant planet. You respawn in your ship. Fortunately, it's close to the surface. You exit this planet, make it through the minefield of moons and moon fragments once again, and you're out of the woods. You're no longer going into gas giants, but you're now getting into ice giants. And these planets aren't much better at all. And that's because they are still literally gas giants. They're not made of ice. They're just comprised of elements that are heavier than helium. And they are obviously extremely cold. Approaching the next planet in the first ice giant, you once again have to navigate a minefield of moon fragments. And once you've successfully navigated that, you are met with a beautiful sight. You look outside the window and bestow your eyes upon Uranus. Obviously, upon seeing it, the first thing you want to do is just get inside it. You need to penetrate Uranus to see what's inside, right? That's what this mission is all about. So before you could even orbit this planet, you simply begin to descend. And soon enough, you're penetrating the surface of Uranus. One of the first things that you notice is how dark it is at this part of the solar system. You are so far from the sun that even on the surface of Uranus, the surface level clouds, it is already pretty dark, and it's only gonna get darker the deeper you go. Upon penetrating Uranus, you're met with unbreathable and some toxic gases, with the majority of Uranus's atmosphere being comprised of hydrogen, helium, and methane, none of which are breathable for humans. But you've got your spacesuit on, and you're still in your ship, so you continue to dive deeper. It's not long before you notice the extreme cold, with temperatures already reaching negative 195 degrees Celsius, which, if you were outside, would be enough to almost instantly kill you. But you're still in your ship and still descending deeper into Uranus. And now you are getting into the heart of some of these storms happening on Uranus, with winds up to 900 km/h. Winds that could potentially be fatal and at the very least mess you up horribly. And as you continue to descend, it is extremely dark, the winds are horrible, and now your ship is being pelted. Initially by ice-like crystals, and the deeper you go, you notice that these aren't crystals anymore. These are fully formed diamonds being pelted at your spaceship at over 900 km/h, something you haven't seen up until now. And at this moment, you're inspired to get out. You still haven't met any sort of solid surface yet, but you park your ship by hovering it, you press the button, and step out. You step into a 900 km/h gust of wind, and instantly are pelted with another gust of wind carrying diamonds in the opposite direction, going again 900 km/h, having your entire body be penetrated by these diamond fragments. And while you are dying and bleeding out and asphyxiating due to all of the holes in your spacesuit, you begin to notice the immense pressure crushing your body smaller and smaller in the intense heat that now exists at this deeper level. Uranus is regarded as the coldest planet in the solar system, but at this point, near the core of the planet, it is extremely hot, and you are being crushed, melted, vaporized, and pelted with diamonds. A fate quite similar to the last few you experienced, although this one at least includes diamonds, which is cool. But I think at this point it's safe to say playing in Uranus can definitely get dangerous. You're back on your ship, safe, and you're happy to be out of Uranus. So you quickly head to the final planet on this list, the second and final ice giant, that being Neptune. Now, I'll be honest, Neptune is extremely similar to Uranus as far as composition and what exactly would happen if you were to experience this planet. And because I can't make as many puns with this planet, I'm gonna keep this one relatively brief. Assuming you penetrate the surface of Neptune and decide to park the ship there and simply jump into the void, you would experience extremely cold temperatures, followed by extreme winds, and then rising temperatures and rising pressure until you are pelted by, once again, diamond rain, and then disintegrated into the darkness and abyss that is the core of Neptune. A story similar to the previous planets, but no less severe. Your death on Neptune, while instant, would be horrible. You respawn on your ship, and before heading back to Earth, you realize that you still have one respawn left. And because this is Trust Me Bro, and we're always extra, we decide to head to the forgotten planet of our lifetime. The dwarf planet that still exists in our solar system, but is no longer recognized as an official planet, and that would be Pluto. One of the first ways you could die in regards to Pluto is dying of boredom, because Pluto is so damn far away. But because we have Instagram Reels, you're able to entertain yourself for the entirety of the trip, and you are now orbiting the dwarf planet that nobody loves. You make your descent onto the surface of this planet, and you can only help but notice how small it is. It almost reminds you of the moon. But as you look back towards the sun, you notice something you haven't seen before. The sun, at this point, almost looks like a star in the distance. Sure, you can tell it's the sun, but it's at this point exceedingly small, and much smaller than it was when you were on Mercury. And speaking of Mercury, you notice once again that Pluto has almost no atmosphere, meaning that your landing was rough and you are in for some extremely strange experiences. Being this far from the sun means that it's dark and cold all of the time. And this is something that at this point, you're just prepared for. You hit the button and step into negative 229 degrees Celsius temperatures, a temperature that you may notice is actually colder than liquid nitrogen. And because the surface of this planet is colder than liquid nitrogen, you would essentially experience what it would feel like to jump into a pool of liquid nitrogen. Any liquid on or around your body would instantly be boiled, and your skin would feel like it's almost burning. We've reached temperatures so cold they feel hot once again. Your skin would freeze, and all of your flesh, including your muscles, your fat, your everything, begin to turn into a frigid, hard solid. Every cell in your body would die and turn black, and your dark, mummified body would essentially live on as a statue on the surface of Pluto, literally frozen in time. And my only hope for you would be that you left yourself in a funny position, if you even had time to get there. And with that, you use your last respawn, you get back in your ship, and you head back to Earth. You have multiple logbooks full of your experience being documented, and once you return to NASA and hand in this information, they regretfully inform you that they appreciate you going on this trip, but they actually just developed a drone that could have done all of this. And the worst part is, they actually developed it before you left. But because you seemed so excited about going, they didn't want to break your spirit, so they let you go anyway. But at least you got to play in Uranus. The secret meaning behind every dream. Picture this. You tuck yourself into bed, getting cozy, ready for a well-deserved night's sleep, when almost instantly after closing your eyes and falling asleep, you find yourself having the most odd dream of all time. This dream is so vivid, in fact, that you wake up, remembering almost everything about this dream that you were just having. At first, this dream seems random and devoid of any meaning, but you decided to take a peek to see if it could possibly mean anything. And after taking a quick look on Google, you realize that you are not the first person to have this dream, and that there are many interpretations on what it could possibly mean. Chances are, if you're watching this video, you've had a similar experience, which is why I wanted to describe all of the most common dream themes in one video. Dreams are so cool, but I think it's important to understand why we even dream in the first place. And to put it as briefly as possible, when we go to bed and rest our conscious minds, our subconscious minds are going to work to process all of the information from that day, trying to make sense of the world and everything that we experienced. Just imagine if every time you went outside and did something, you wrote down everything you saw and everything you did on a sticky note. By the end of the day, you would have a lot of sticky notes. And those sticky notes would probably need to be organized. That is what your subconscious mind is doing when you are sleeping. But what's interesting about that is that your subconscious mind does not speak the same language as you. Your conscious mind understands language and logic, although your subconscious mind understands the world through a different means, feelings, images, and metaphors. And that alone is a big reason why your dreams seem so random. I think social worker and sleep expert Suzanne Bergman described dreams best when she said, quote, "Dreams are a universal language." creating often elaborate images out of emotional concepts. But with that being said, although there is no solid scientific connection between certain dreams and specific emotional states, there is definitely implied meanings behind a handful of very common dreams. And in this video, I'm gonna describe every single one of them. Let's begin. Dreaming of falling. I would bet money that almost everybody watching this video has had a similar experience to this. You go to bed, you lay down, you close your eyes, and you begin to feel yourself falling asleep. But just before you could fall fully asleep, your body jolts and you are woken up instantly. Now, I mentioned this one first because it is the most common dream of all time. And it's interesting because this jolt that actually wakes you up out of your dream isn't necessarily always associated with falling, although in most cases it is. And whether this spasm was accompanied by a dream or not, it still is the same thing. It is called a hyptic jerk, and it is actually an arousal of our primal instinct that allows us to quickly get up out of sleep and defend ourselves in a dangerous situation. Another place you actually see this response a lot is when people prank people that are sleeping. You'll notice that these sleeping people that are being pranked will quickly get up and assume some sort of offensive position, and it will typically take time for their mind to catch up to what their body's already doing. That is a major difference between the subconscious and conscious mind. But going back to the falling part of this dream, why do people dream about falling specifically? Just think about it. When you are falling, you are in likely the most vulnerable state you can be in. You are simply at the whim of gravity, waiting for whatever the outcome of this fall may be to happen. So for that reason, falling is a pretty good metaphor for feeling like you're losing control in your life, or at least fearful or anxious of losing that control. And this control could be anything. You could feel like you're losing control to bad habits. You could feel like you're losing control of who you truly are. You could feel like you're losing control of your life because your school schedule is so packed or your job is too overbearing. There are a plethora of life situations that could cause you to feel these feelings, but in most cases, when people experience a dream of falling, the most common interpretation of this is that the person experiencing that dream is feeling anxiety, fear, and most prominently, a sense of losing control. Being chased. Falling was definitely the most commonly reported dream, but I can only imagine that being chased was a close second, because for me personally, this is a dream that I've had throughout my entire life. And I would imagine you've had a similar dream as well. And the deeper or secret meaning behind this dream is actually pretty self-explanatory. And the commonly accepted meaning is that this dream is a feeling of avoidance. In the dream that you experienced, you could have been chased by a murderer, a monster, a killer, an animal, a bear, whatever it may be, but no matter what was chasing you or in what scenario, the usual suspect for this chasing dream to even come about is because of an inner conflict that you either subconsciously or maybe even consciously know that you're avoiding. And even with this small bit of context, things may start to make a bit more sense. Like for example, if you go to bed tonight and you just dream that you're being chased by a bear, you're going to wake up thinking you had a nightmare and it was random. But if you understand the context that typically in dreams where you're being chased, you are reminding yourself that there is an internal conflict that you have not resolved, then you can kind of put back the pieces and realize that, oh yeah, I wasn't really dreaming about a bear. My mind was just symbolizing the fact that I am totally avoiding dealing with X, Y, or Z in my life. And once again, there's a million things that you could be avoiding that you know you have to face. But because your subconscious mind is extremely creative and doesn't speak English, you end up getting a murderer or a bear chasing you in your sleep. Teeth falling out. We're starting to get a bit more niche here, but this is actually another dream that I have personally experienced. In my specific situation, I was just dreaming that I was in the bathroom and I looked in the mirror. And as I looked in the mirror, my teeth were extremely loose and I was actually able to touch them and they were just falling out. Obviously, this dream was rather disturbing and it grossed me out, and when I woke up, I remembered it vividly and was pretty unsettled by it. So unsettled that it caused me to actually Google what this could possibly mean. And it was that entire experience that later inspired this exact video. But with that being said, what could teeth falling out mean in a dream? Does it mean that you subconsciously know you need to brush your teeth more? And while in most cases that isn't the case, I would say that's definitely not impossible either. Like I said, this is all interpretation. And for example, if you did know that you had to brush your teeth and you weren't, and you dreamt about it, that could very well be the reason why. But in most cases, why people dream of their teeth falling out is much deeper and much more severe. In short, dreams of losing teeth is most often linked to stress, fear, and uncertainty. At this point, a common theme, but it goes a bit deeper. In some beliefs, teeth symbolize stability and security. So if your mind is creating dreams where this symbol of security and stability is just falling out of your mouth, that could be a representation of how you feel in your waking life. Do you have a pain that you are just simply not addressing, or are you simply stressed out? Any of these situations could potentially cause you to have a dream about losing your teeth. And if you've personally ever experienced a similar sort of dream, think about what was going on in your life during the time, and if there was anything that you could pinpoint that could have potentially caused this dream. Losing your hair. Similar to the situations we discussed previously with losing your teeth, a dream about losing your hair can typically be caused by similar experiences, although there's a bit of a twist. Because where teeth in some places represent stability and security, hair represents beauty and youth. And in that context, a dream about losing your hair is typically associated with a feeling of stress or vulnerability around someone's self-esteem, whether it be the fear of aging or an insecurity of your personal looks, potentially triggered by some sort of bullying. And while this niche interpretation seems logical, there's also more general associations around having a hair loss dream, specifically feeling like you're losing control of some aspect of your life or feeling, once again, vulnerable. Already, we're starting to see a common theme among different dreams, but I think it's important to reiterate these things and also highlight the differences and nuances. Drowning. Drowning may be one of the most unsettling of the common dreams we're going to be discussing in this video, because I think the situation for many, myself included, is a true worst possible fear, which just makes the lifelike situation, your dream, feel even more unsettling. Regardless, if you have experienced this dream, what could it possibly mean? And similar to the first dream we discussed of falling, drowning has a very similar interpretation, specifically feeling either overwhelmed or, once again, out of control in your life. But it does go a bit deeper than that, because drowning is typically associated with a feeling of being smothered. And while there is an endless amount of things that could make you feel smothered in life, these dreams are typically triggered by either a situation that is so overbearing, emotions that are at this point too strong to care anymore, or responsibilities that you have that you feel like are literally drowning you. Drowning, like falling, is another situation where you are completely out of control. It's you versus Mother Nature. And while you may not be falling, waiting to hit the ground, with drowning, I think it might almost be worse, because you are consistently fighting against the waves in the water, just trying to stay afloat, knowing that eventually you're going under. If you've personally experienced a drowning dream, try to reflect. Was this around a time where you felt overwhelmed by something in your life? Potentially you just had too much on your plate with school, sports, life, family, friends. Maybe you were going through something really tough and the emotions were just too much to bear at times. Like I mentioned, all of these dreams are different interpretations, and they could also be triggered by a number of life situations. But most typically, drowning is interpreted as feeling overwhelmed and out of control. Fighting. Fighting dreams are very common, but also, interestingly, very intense. Now, that sounds a bit odd to say on this list where most of these dreams are intense, but I think out of all of them, fighting is some of the most intense because it literally activates the neurochemicals that would activate your fight, flight, or freeze response. But that being said, if you have this dream about fighting, what does it mean? And there's actually, obviously, a lot of interpretations, but there's a few primary ones depending on who you're fighting. If you have a dream about physically fighting somebody that you know in your daily life, let's say this is a friend of yours, that dream would typically be symbolic that you have some sort of unsettled trauma or dispute or negative emotions that have not been fully sorted out. And this dream could be your subconscious mind trying to remind you that we need to do something about the situation. And I think this interpretation is somewhat obvious. I think this is one of those dreams that you don't necessarily need to Google. Like if you had a dream about fighting your friend and you knew that this friend owed you money, you could be able to put two and two together. Although if you had this dream and you didn't think you had any issue with your friend, but then you sat and thought about it and realized that, oh, actually, last time I saw this guy, he said something that rubbed me the wrong way, but I kind of let it slide. Maybe this might be a good opportunity to bring that situation up to him and be like, hey, that thing, whatever the case may be. Now, here's where things get interesting. If this person in your dream that you are fighting is not somebody that you know or recognize, or maybe doesn't even have a face at all, they're like a character that you haven't unlocked yet, what this typically symbolizes is that you have some internal conflict that you are trying deeply to resolve. And this could go for a lot of things. Perhaps you're at a crossroads in your life and you don't know which way to go. This dream could be representing your indecision. Or perhaps you're doing something that you know you shouldn't be doing, or you're not doing what you should be doing. This dream, once again, could interpret your better self trying to bring you out of a slump, but you're fighting a version of yourself that is still falling into bad habits. And when you get into dream lore, you kind of learn about something known as the shadow self, which is essentially a subconscious version of you, but that may be kind of beyond the scope of this video. Regardless, fighting dreams almost always symbolize an internal conflict, whether that be an internal conflict against yourself, a situation you're facing, or even how you feel about another person. And depending on who you're fighting, that could be a major clue into what kind of situation you are subconsciously dealing with. Being naked in public. Okay, this one isn't just a dream, it's the dream. Totally joking, but I'm glad that this one isn't as tense as the other ones, although the meaning is still just as serious. I think this is another one of those dreams that isn't necessarily extremely difficult to try to decode on a surface level, but there are some nuances that we'll get into. I think intuitively we kind of all understand that a dream of being naked in a public place can be symbolic for feeling vulnerable, but I think even taking it a step deeper than that, this imagery can be symbolic of insecurities that you're feeling, a need for acceptance, or potentially a fear of judgment or criticism. If you're at a place in your life where you feel like you are under immense pressure and being judged and criticized at every move, You may be dreaming of being naked because for how much you're being judged in your day-to-day life, you might as well just be naked because everybody looks at you so weird and sees you as alien, or at least that may be how your subconscious mind, understands that criticism. When you get criticized or called out, you feel exposed. You feel literally vulnerable and alone, and the same sort of situation exists when you are naked in public. You're the only person with no clothes on and everybody's looking at you. This dream is funny to think about, but it's definitely an uncomfortable dream to have, and it's once again rooted in some pretty serious negative emotions. Being pregnant. Now, this is specifically if you're having a dream about being pregnant while not being pregnant. I think if you're pregnant and have a dream about being pregnant, you're just having a dream. I don't think there's necessarily a special meaning there, but interestingly, it's said that this dream isn't necessarily limited to just women, and that men could also have this dream of being pregnant. And if you're a man who has had this dream, drop it in the comments. But this is also the first dream that we've discussed that doesn't have a negative connection to it, actually, which is a nice change of pace. And dreams of being pregnant typically symbolize new beginnings, personal growth, or the anticipation of a significant life change. And if you look at it that way, it kind of makes sense why your subconscious mind would illustrate these things as pregnancy. If you think about pregnancy, it's a similar thing. It's a new beginning. There is literally personal growth, and there is a huge life change coming. And I guess with all of these dreams, or potentially any dream you could have, if you understand the context that a dream is just your subconscious mind that communicates through images and feelings trying to understand the world, then you can almost reverse engineer these things to see what's really going on. And it's that exact reverse engineering process that's given us all of these kind of interpretations, because like I mentioned, they're interpretations. They're not scientifically proven. They're just commonly accepted representations. And so far, I think a lot of them make sense. And for some of them, I've experienced exactly the situation and the exact feelings that they've described. So if you're a woman who's had a dream about being pregnant, or if you're a man who's had a dream about being pregnant, understand that this isn't necessarily a bad thing. And it doesn't just mean that you're going to be pregnant in the near future. I mean, potentially it could mean that depending on what you believe or how you interpret it. But in most cases, it's just a simple representation of personal change, personal growth, and new beginnings either ongoing or in the near future. Death. Taking almost a 180 from dreams of being pregnant, we have dreams of dying. Now, interestingly, dreams of dying have typically very similar associations to dreams of being pregnant, which is why I put them side by side. Now, on the surface, a dream of yourself personally dying could be one of the scariest and most upsetting dreams you can have. And in some cases, and in some cultures, this dream is taken literally, and it means that, oh, this is a sign that I'm gonna die soon. Which, I mean, depending what you believe, maybe it could be the case, but in most instances, that isn't the case at all, and that's typically not what your subconscious is trying to tell you. Similar to how your subconscious mind illustrates a new beginning as a pregnancy, your brain could also take the same input and illustrate death. But this isn't necessarily the death of you. This could be the death of a chapter in your life. Whether it be you start a new relationship, you end a relationship, you start a new job, you start thinking a different way, you start working out, whatever major life change is happening in your life, there is a death of the old version of yourself, and potentially even the death of something in your life, like a job or a schooling system or whatever the case may be. So it's interesting to think, if you've ever had a dream of yourself personally dying, is there anything that was going on at the time that was a big pivotal moment for you that ended up being ideally positive? This dream could have been extremely scary and you might have even considered it to be a nightmare, but perhaps your mind wasn't necessarily representing your death, but it was representing the death of something in your life. Now, that kind of goes out the window if your dream was, you getting murdered or hit by a car. Like, I feel like depending on how gruesome your death was, potentially there's more going on there, and it kind of leans into some of the other things we've discussed with, with feeling out of control and feeling stressed out and overwhelmed. I would say if you had a gruesome death, you're probably not like, yeah, this is a new beginning. This is why I dreamt of getting hit by an 18-wheeler. Like, I don't think that's the connection, but yeah. It's typically believed that symbolically, a dream of death can be the metaphor of a chapter of your life closing, allowing a new chapter to begin. Meeting a lost loved one. If you've ever lost a loved one, whether it be a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, whoever it may be, then you've probably had a dream about them at some point after their passing. And you've maybe even wanted to dream about them just to have more communication with them. Now, with this specific, very sensitive issue, there is a lot of interpretations and beliefs surrounding them. And while that obviously goes for all of these entries, I want to make that explicitly clear for this one as well. For people who have had a dream of meeting a loved one once again after their passing, it's typically believed that this dream is symbolic of an individual reflecting on the relationship that they had with this lost individual, or potentially even them grieving this lost individual and desiring a deep connection with them once again. And like I mentioned, it makes sense if you think about it. If you've lost a loved one and, that is just gone now, your subconscious mind is going to have to do a lot of work to try to comprehend what that even means. And that person may be interjected into your dream as a result. And some interpretations include that if you meet a lost loved one in your dream, that is that lost loved one specifically trying to contact you, or I guess successfully contacting you to let you know that they have made it to the other side and that they are with you and whatever they may say to you in the dream, if they say anything at all. So this one is interesting because there's a lot of ways you could take it. It could be a representation of you trying to deal with the loss of this person and trying to understand your new relationship with them after them being gone, or it could even be them communicating with you from the other side. But whatever you may believe, it's interesting to understand these dreams and try to ponder them when they happen. But I do think this entry is likely the most self-explanatory on the list. You're dreaming about a lost loved one because you're thinking about a lost loved one. But regardless, it's a pretty straightforward dream, although there's still a ton to unpack around it. Snakes. Before we get to the last common dream on this list, I just want to say that there is a ton more of crazy and common dreams I want to discuss. But time is limited for every video. So if you want a part 2 with more common dreams, either leave a like or leave a comment below letting me know that you want that video, and I'll be more than happy to make it. Oh, and if you're enjoying this video and watch us often, feel free to subscribe. It turns out a good majority of you guys aren't even subscribed, but if you enjoyed the video, you might as well. It's free, and I hear it gives you good dreams. But back to snakes. Snakes are one of the most interesting dreams I've researched for this video. Specifically because I could not get one solid read. Like I mentioned, every dream I discussed is open to interpretation, and there are plenty of interpretations, but typically there is an underlying common denominator. When it comes to snakes, literally everything was just straight up contradictory. Like even if you just Google, what does it mean if you dream about snakes? It will literally say in the same sentence, healing and hidden threats. But with that being said, what are some of the more common understandings of seeing snakes in dreams? And it really depends on the context you see this snake in. Now, if you see this snake in a neutral context and it's just kind of in an outdoor environment and you see it go by and it's not a negative experience, that could actually be a positive symbol, typically meaning transformation and healing, because snakes are known for shedding their skin, starting anew. That could be, once again, another symbol of rebirth, transformation, healing. That's pretty positive. But if you're having a dream where you're being chased by a snake, that kind of goes back to our initial dream of being chased. You feel like you are running away or being followed by something that you are avoiding that is at this point becoming overwhelming and needs to be dealt with. Now, a bit more nuanced, if you see a snake that's in your personal home or in a safe space where a snake should not be, and you are personally scared of this snake in this environment, then this may be a sign that in your life you are dealing with either hidden dangers or hidden threats from people in your life. You might feel like someone might not have your best interest in mind, whether it be a friend, a coworker, a peer, whoever it may be, or this snake might even represent something that you're doing to yourself. Once again, referring to that shadow work or that shadow version of yourself. So it's just interesting because snakes could represent a plethora of things. It really just kind of comes down to the context of which you see it. A snake in nature could represent rebirth. A snake chasing you could represent you avoiding an issue in your life. A snake in your house could represent you feeling unsafe or threatened. And a snake in your boot might mean that you're in Toy Story. But what do you guys think? If you guys have experienced any of these dreams, please let me know in the comments below. And what do you guys think of these interpretations? If you have any additional interpretations, please leave them in the comments. I know that almost every religion and culture has their own interpretations and versions of what these dreams could mean, and I'd love to hear them more in the comments. The craziest urban legends you've never heard of. It's the mid-1980s, and you and your friends are stumbling home after a long night of drinking. You're walking through the dimly lit streets when you notice something in the distance. Your friend is joking with you and talking about how wasted he is, but something catches your eye. You see a woman on the other side of the road and you recognize her from inside the bar. She appears to be using a payphone, but it's not quite working. As you get closer, you stop your friend's rambling and ask him if you think you should see if she needs help. Your friend says to leave her alone, but you have an odd feeling. And before you are even close enough to yell across the road, asking if she needs help, you notice a car drive up. An ambulance. But this was no regular ambulance. This ambulance was unmarked, fully black, with dark tinted windows. The ambulance pulled up right in front of this woman at the payphone, and almost as quickly as it appeared, it drove off. And you notice the woman was gone too. In this instance, you have just witnessed another victim of the black ambulance. The black ambulance is an urban legend from Czechoslovakia and Romania that became popular in the 1980s. And the story claimed that a mysterious black ambulance with tinted windows and no markings would roam the streets at night, abducting people, particularly people that were alone and vulnerable. Witnesses who alleged to have saw the black ambulance said that they even saw people be forced into the ambulance and even heard cries for help from within. This interesting legend spread quickly through word of mouth, which fueled local rumors, which then spread to nationwide media. The fear of being targeted by the black ambulance actually caused people to be more vigilant and take extra precautions when going out, specifically at night. With this being an urban legend, there is no concrete evidence to support the existence of the black ambulance, but there is numerous reports made stating a sighting or even an abduction done by the ambulance. The exact origin of this urban legend isn't fully known, but it's suggested that it may have been a manifestation of the social unrest in Czechoslovakia at the time, which is now obviously the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Personally, I think the black ambulance is the perfect urban legend because it's just on the verge of believable. Organ harvesting is a real thing, and unfortunately, so is people being abducted. And I mean, ambulances are real too. And if you heard multiple rumors from people you knew about sightings of this mysterious black ambulance, you may think twice before writing it off entirely. The black ambulance is creepy, but fortunately, you are not its victim. At least that time. Not too long after your drinking days in Prague, you go on a trip to Mexico with your friend. The same friend, actually. You just finished a big night on the town in Mexico City, and once again, you're tipsy, and you and your friend are walking home. You saved money on the vacation by getting a cheap hotel a little bit outside of town, and for some reason this night you were just unable to find a taxi. So you and your friend were in for a long walk. On this walk, you get further and further outside of town when the city lights begin to fade and the darkness begins to swallow up the horizon in front of you. It's at this time when you're walking down the road where you notice a red car. You had no plans of hitchhiking and you didn't signal to this vehicle, but as they drive past you, they stop. You don't necessarily even plan on walking up to the vehicle, but they're parked directly in your path. And as you walk by the car, you notice that this red car is full of beautiful women. And the car conveniently has 2 seats available for you and your friend. They tell you not only that they can give you a ride, but that they can make all of your dreams come true. Because you're tipsy and half tired, you need to take a double take to make sure this is even real. Your friend is already in the car before you even had the chance to ponder the opportunity, and with some hesitation, you get in the vehicle as well. These women ask where you're going and begin to give you a ride in the direction you were going. Only a few minutes into this drive though, the women become quiet and take a turn onto a road that you didn't instruct them to. It's at this point when they begin speaking in a language you've never heard before and you get an odd feeling. This will be the last thing you remember. I think it's obvious that this was no regular encounter. This was the experience of a victim of the red car, an urban legend from Mexico. This urban legend involves a red car that travels between Mexico City and Cuernavaca, specifically looking for men. The car is full of women, but not ordinary women. These women are witches, and they're looking to pick up men for demonic rituals. They will pick up men that they find and offer them anything they want. They'll say basically anything to get these men in the car. But their intentions are, as you may have guessed, devious. Every man that enters this mysterious red vehicle is found lifeless on the side of the road later that same night. These bodies are typically found beaten to death with bruises, cuts, and arcane symbols carved into them. Obviously signs of a ritualistic sacrifice from these witches. Like the black ambulance, the exact origin of this urban legend is unknown, but its purpose is likely to serve as a cautionary tale against taking random back roads alone at night, or even getting in mysterious cars with mysterious women, which is an interesting twist. I thought I'd put the 2 vehicle-based urban legends together because I thought they were fitting and the stories blended well together. So yeah, whether you're in the Czech Republic in the 1980s or Mexico in the modern day, don't get in black ambulances or mysterious red vehicles, especially if women are claiming to make your dreams come true, because that always comes with a price. And in this case, that price is your life. But these obscure urban legends are only the tip of the iceberg. Let's switch things up a bit. The year is 1958, and it's just the beginning of the gold rush in Arizona. The gold rush is popularly known for the opportunities of riches and prospecting and Minecraft in real life. But most people don't understand the harsh reality of the gold rush. Not only was finding gold itself particularly hard, which led a lot of miners to actually find silver and copper instead, but these times where people would move into remote locations, specifically in harsh climates like in the middle of the desert, typically came with the spread of disease, malnutrition due to lack of supplies, poor availability to water and any sort of healthcare, and extremely dangerous working conditions to say the least. Trying to get rich off the gold rush was definitely not for the faint of heart. You and your family are moving out west because even where you were at before, you were starving and not making ends meet. So moving to the middle of the desert to at least have an opportunity to make money at least sounded like a little bit of hope. You move your wife and 2 children into a place known as Luna's Canyon, which is ironic because that's the same name as your wife, Luna. Your wife, Luna, was a homemaker, taking care of her 2 children, homeschooling them, cooking for them, preparing what she could around the house, and ultimately being the best mother she could be. And your job was to get the gold. You would go on 2-week trips at a time, taking your mule into the mines and hoping for the best. During these 2 weeks, you would sometimes find plenty of material and come back home for a week or so and have the best week you've ever had, with an abundance of food and warmth and a sense of hope and pride. And at the end of other 2-week trips, you would be almost coming home empty-handed, letting your wife know that you're gonna have to eat sparse for the next month. Regardless, you and your family always figured it out. That was until one time. It was a day like any other. You're packing up your mule, saying goodbye to your kids and your wife, going on another 2-week expedition. And you had particularly high hopes for this expedition. Although, as you get to the mine, you begin searching and looking, and you find the biggest gold nugget you've ever seen before. You consider even going home early, as this is more than a year's worth of income just in one nugget. This is amazing. But before you could even fully process what you have just found, you heard a cracking noise. And before you could even process what that noise could have meant, the mine collapsed on top of you, killing you instantly. This may be where your story ends, but it's not the end of the urban legend. Back home, your wife has no idea what's going on and is going about her life business as usual. Although after the 2 weeks pass and you're not home, she begins to get a bit anxious. But she waits. 3 weeks after you've gone, all food is essentially gone. You haven't eaten in days, and now any food that you could have fed your kids is gone too. Your wife is beginning to lose hope, and her sanity is starting to slip as well too. Her kids are making it very well known that they are hungry and tired and miss their dad, and you too are extremely hungry, extremely tired, and now at a loss for what to do. That was until one fateful night. Your wife Luna seemed to have broken. After another night of being unable to sleep, she slipped out of her clothes and put on her wedding dress of all things. She grabbed the biggest knife she could find in the kitchen, and she used that knife on her 2 children. She slain her own children and then cut them up into small pieces and brought them to a nearby pond where she put them in the water. The blood-stained water revealed her reflection to herself, and she seemed to have snapped back into reality and realized what she had done. She screamed the most blood-curdling scream you've ever heard, and almost instantly after passed out and died from starvation. And even with the entire family now being gone, the urban legend still isn't over. Today, this canyon is known as Slaughterhouse Canyon, and it is said that the spirits of this family still haunts the area. And on particularly quiet nights, if you listen closely, you can still hear the blood-curdling screams of the mother as she realized what she had done. And on even rarer occasions, you may even hear a quiet sobbing sound. The legend of Slaughterhouse Canyon is definitely creepy and obviously scary, and to me, seems like reason enough to not visit this specific canyon in Arizona. But of course, there's weird people who hear stories like this and make it a mission to go to these locations. But who knows, maybe I'm the weird one for not wanting to go. Slaughterhouse Canyon is just 12 minutes from Kingman, Arizona, and it is a popular spot for ghost hunting. This urban legend is definitely tragic and pretty morbid to say the least. This honestly reminds me of La Llorona, which is actually a Spanish urban legend I've covered a long time ago. That urban legend was actually my first ever mythical creature video, and I may or may not have pronounced it wrong the first time. But that urban legend basically states that she drowned her own children in the lake and then similarly realized what she had done and then drowned herself. And after her death, her ghost still haunted small bodies of water, crying and screaming at night, leading people to the water for her to drown. So definitely some similarities, but some differences there. But yeah, Slaughterhouse Canyon is creepy, and if true, is extremely tragic and unfortunate. Let's go back to Europe, because we have some unfinished business. Unfortunately, it's not anything to do with mining. However, it does involve hairy hands. This one's simple, so let me quickly set the scene. The year is 1915, and you're driving a car in Dartmoor, England. It's getting late, just past sunset, and you had just finished a day of hiking around Dartmoor National Park. You're heading home and heading up a particular stretch of road that is known for its curves, when all of a sudden you see 2 large, disembodied, hairy hands grab your steering wheel and violently turn them all the way to the left, making you drive off the road and flip your vehicle. In this case, fortunately, you're only banged and bruised up, and in the hospital, you're being asked what exactly happened. You think it's probably wise to say nothing, but you go against your judgment and tell the nurses that large hands took the wheel of your car and forced you off the road. But instead of having sympathy, they put you in a straitjacket and a padded room. Okay, so yeah, hairy hands is weird. It's an urban legend from England and basically goes exactly as I described. The story dates back to around the 1910s, again, with no concrete origin. origin, but stemmed out of reports of vehicles swerving uncontrollably off the road as if something else had taken control of them and their vehicle. Hairy hands was more or less of a local rumor around Dartmoor until it gained national attention in 1921, after a series of accidents happened in the same spot, including one fatal crash of a medical officer. I couldn't find any specific reports of these hands taking control of people's vehicles, but it is claimed that this was a confession of some who had experienced accidents on this road in Dartmoor. Now, I will say, coincidentally, this road where a lot of these accidents took place were on a road that was particularly narrow and had what was known as a dangerous camber, which is essentially just the incline of the road. So with this road being relatively dangerous in nature and having accidents common there, it is likely that people may be blaming the supernatural for their accidents. And considering that this happened in the early 1900s, 1910s, 1920s, I think it's also likely that people were enjoying a beverage on the road, which likely contributed to this series of events. It kind of sounds like a drunk person's explanation for what happened too. It's almost like watching an old episode of Cops when you're home from school sick, and you just see an obviously drunk guy get pulled over for like crashing his car, and the police are like, "Sir, have you been drinking?" And the guy's just like, "No, these huge hairy hands just grabbed my wheel. It was crazy." But yeah, hairy hands is an example of a simple urban legend that to me isn't really believable. But it's still interesting, and it's an urban legend, so I'm here to have some fun. Before we continue, I want to make 2 quick notes. 1, if you've heard of these, you don't need to leave a comment that you've heard of them. It's okay. You're just bigger brained than the rest of us, and enjoy that fact and relive the stories that you already know. Also, if you love urban legend videos, please let me know in the comments below, because I've only made one other urban legend video, and I used to make a ton of videos about mythical creatures, but haven't done so recently. I try to make videos that you guys will enjoy, because ultimately these videos are for you. So if you ever like a specific topic I talk about, make sure you leave a comment or leave a like, because I do take note. Just look at the drug series. I made a lot of those videos because you guys loved them. Okay, let's keep going. We're in Japan now, and you're enjoying some fun. I guess to keep the theme of this video consistent, we're gonna enjoy some of Japan's nightlife, which if you know anything about, you'd know involves Japanese salarymen on the side of the road sleeping 45 minutes before they're due for their next shift. Regardless, you're living it up. You're at some Kirby, Pokemon, anime themed karaoke bar, and the night is coming to a close. But before you go, you decide to use the washroom because urinating in the street is something that you left in the past. You stumble into the washroom and walk over to the urinal. You do your business and you go over to the sink, looking at the mirror above the sink specifically. You didn't have any intentions of washing your hands, but you did want to check yourself out before you headed home. As you're looking in the mirror, you notice the lights flicker, and suddenly you're left in darkness. Nothing in this room is visible, besides strange sticky note that appears to be glowing in the dark. You don't speak Japanese, but you can read the sticky note. It says, "Lily-san." And to you, this can mean anything. And you just assume that this is something you have to say to turn the lights back on. So you look into the mirror, not even intentionally. You're just looking in that direction because the sticky note's on the mirror and that's all you can see. And you say, "Lily-san, Lily-san, Lily-san." You say it 3 times, trying to get the lights to turn back on so you can leave this bathroom. When all of a sudden the lights flicker again and you turn around and you are met with something disturbing. Standing in front of you is the ghostly young girl. Her spirit was trapped in this mirror, and she is seeking revenge on anybody who summons her. Her skin seems to be charred and covered in bandages, and she is emanating the light and heat of a fire, and even smells like a disgusting burning smell. She walks closer to you, and you can feel the heat of this burnt child. She grabs you by your shirt and begins to walk into the mirror, where she pulls you into the other dimension. And you were never seen again. Lily-san is an interesting Japanese urban legend, and I would kind of equate it to the Japanese version of Bloody Mary, which is interesting because it's kind of cool to see like different cultures have similar kind of ideas, which possibly adds some validity, who knows. The Lily-san urban legend was obviously popular in Japan and revolves around a haunted mirror in a school. For the opening story, I just pretended that the person who owned this bar bought this old mirror at an antique store because it was donated by a school that was going to be demolished. That's the lore, let's put it there. But realistically, I just didn't know how I'd make a story about you being an adult in Japan going into a kid's bathroom and doing this challenge. So I just figured let's just switch it up a bit. So yeah, that's the lore of how this school's mirror got into this bar. Like I stated in the stories, the witnesses who have claimed to see Lily-san, whoever these people are, describe her as having charred skin, bandages, and a body that is emitting heat and smelling of burning flesh. This legend has kind of been popularized by school children and has a bunch of different variations, with some of them including Lily-san being able to drag you into the mirror as well. This may come as a shock to you, but there is no evidence of Lily-san's existence yet. But the story did gain popularity primarily through social media and online forums, and through that spread through school grounds, essentially, through kids telling tales. Lily Sand is a simple and kind of silly urban legend. I thought it was interesting because it, to me, struck me as the Japanese Bloody Mary, and it was cool that we had something in common. But if that doesn't tickle your fancy, then I've got one more for you. Staying in Japan, because we already blew our entire travel budget on the first 2 segments, we are once again, actually, you know what? We're not drinking this time. We're doing something else. We are just leaving the Japanese soup kitchen after a long night of feeding people in need. We did something good for once. We're switching it up. You're simply going about your business, feeling good about yourself, when you notice probably the most disturbing thing you've ever seen. You see a dog-like creature walking down the street, but with a human head. This creature is harmless, but if you try to talk to it, it will insult you. Hey, little guy. You're ugly. And after this strange encounter with this odd being, you simply go home and go to bed, because you are a contributing member of society. You don't have time to mess with human-faced dogs or any sort of disrespect. Now, actually getting to the folklore. So this creature is called the Jinmenkin, not to be confused with Jenkum, which we talked about in one of our drug videos. Check it out on screen. But the Jinmenkin is known as the human-faced dog. This creature is also considered a yokai, which is pretty cool if you know about yokai. Basically, it just means a Japanese folklore creature. As suggested in the story, these creatures roam around the streets at night and can be harmless, but people are advised to not engage with them as they can throw insults if you try to conversate with them. These creatures are considered bad omens and have even been blamed for misfortune and accidents since Japan's Edo period. And during the Edo period, sightings of these creatures were actually so common that there was not only media interest, but also attempts to catch these creatures. Like, not just like one guy was hunting, like not like some weirdo, like legit, like organized attempts to catch these Jinmenkin. Some people believe that these creatures are actually people that were killed in accidents or treated poorly in their lives, and they have come back to express their sadness to the world, which is pretty petty in my opinion, but I mean, do you? Interestingly though, this is one of the few urban legends in this video that actually has some recorded evidence. In 1810, a historian claims that he saw a human-faced dog exhibited at a carnival sideshow that was drawing crowds and wealth for the owner of this creature. Since then, modern sightings have still continued, but primarily took place in the 80s, specifically with this creature rummaging through trash and lurking in alleyways, probably in dark places where it's not even easy to kind of tell what you're looking at. It's also claimed that this creature can run up to 60 miles per hour, which is just interesting. Locals speculate that this animal is actually a failed lab experiment, and others compare it to the chupacabra. This is definitely a strange urban legend that I, and probably you, haven't heard of. The ultra strange hobbies of the ultra rich. I think it's become obvious now more than ever that some rich people have really strange hobbies, and in some cases, they're downright evil. So in this video, I wanted to highlight a few of the most interesting cases where rich people are just doing absolutely weird stuff. The entries on this list range from wholesome to interesting to diabolical. It's kind of a mixed bag, so buckle up. And in case you're new, this video will get darker as the video goes on. Jeff Bezos. You may know him as the CEO and entrepreneur born in 1964. I know I made that joke in the last video, but it's still funny. What puts him on today's list? Well, 2 reasons actually. One, that's kind of wholesome and funny. The other, that's kind of strange, but in my opinion, kind of cool. At a conference in 2017, Amazon CEO Jeffrey Bezos admitted that he used to eat an entire pack of Pillsbury biscuits for breakfast every morning, with butter, of course. Supposedly, this biscuit-eating bandit had a bit of a problem, and borderline an addiction to eating these fluffy little pastries. He also mentioned that his wife made him quit and encouraged him to do so by simply reading the label, which he says, and I quote, "Honestly, that wasn't even a concept for me," which I guess just goes to show, when you're on that grind, you will eat anything. I'll throw the ingredients on screen for you to check out. If you're into nutrition, you'll get a good laugh out of these ingredients. One thing I do want to point out is the sheer amount of calories in these biscuits. Each individual biscuit has 170 calories, and each container has 8 biscuits, meaning that for breakfast alone, Bezos was eating over 1,300 calories, not including the butter, and that was just one meal. And of course, it was primarily consisting of carbs and salt. He did eventually clean up his act though, because this is his before and after. There was a lot of other things at play here, but I mean, at least one of the differences was he wasn't eating a can of biscuits every morning. If you're watching this thinking, that's not weird, I do that every morning, well, at least you have something in common with a billionaire, I guess. But another interesting and rather strange project that he's committed to is also his Millennium Clock. Bezos has invested $42 million into a clock that ticks once a year that is set to keep time for the next 10,000 years. The clock advances every 100 years, and the cuckoo part of this literally cuckoo clock will come out in 10,000 years. This clock is located in a mountain on Bezos' property in Texas. And personally, as a watch nerd, I find this kind of cool. But spending $42 million on a clock in the ground is kind of hilarious, and in my opinion, a bit strange. This next name on the list is a name I'm sure you've heard a lot recently, and I'm honestly kind of surprised how early they are in the list. But out of all of his interesting hobbies I'm sure that exist, this one I found the most interesting. I'm talking about Donald Trump and his obsession with golf. It's no surprise that old men love golf. It's no surprise that old rich men love golf. So it's no surprise that Donald Trump is a huge golf fan, especially considering he owns multiple golf courses. You may be asking, where's the strange hobby? Well, you may or may not know, Trump was previously the president. And during his time in office, he played an estimated 261 rounds of golf, which is essentially one full round every 5.5 days. This is either going to strike you as not a surprise or very surprising. And to me, I found this to be a very interesting statistic, mainly because I'm under the impression that being the president is a very important and very busy job, including travel, meetings, press, and much more. So the fact that this guy was able to fit in 18 holes of golf every 5.5 days on average is pretty insane. And if that's not weird enough for you, just look at his drive. It works and it's better than mine, but it definitely looks a little goofy. And in case that isn't strange enough for you, this man has been reported to drink 12 cans of Diet Coke a day, which to some of you may seem insane and to others may seem relatable. Regardless of how you feel, these are only tame examples and we're about to get into some weirder ones. Let's turn this up a notch. Mark Zuckerberg. Did you know that Mark Zuckerberg kills animals with his bare hands? Hopefully not, because that's not fully true. But he does have a slaughterhouse where he is obsessed with getting cows drunk. I'm not kidding. He opened up a beef farm in Hawaii to produce the highest quality beef known to man. And according to him, the best way to do this is by feeding them macadamia nuts and beer. I don't know anything about raising beef, and I don't even eat meat, but I think there is something interesting about giving farm animals alcohol. These are either the happiest cows on the planet or simply living the life of a divorced dad. Regardless, I'm moving on because this next one is wild. Steve Jobs. To really set the scene for this next hobby or habit, I want you to close your eyes and visualize. You're in your massive office overlooking the city. You just got off a meeting and you just lost a major deal. You're upset, you're stressed out, and you're looking for a way to calm down before getting back to work and winning the next deal. If you were Steve Jobs, your next move would be to go into the bathroom, take off your shoes, and dip your feet into the toilet to simply relax. I know I like to say a lot of funny things, but this is a rumor that is really well known and considered to be true. When I first heard it, I didn't believe it either, and it was also one of the inspirations for this entire video. But this claim of Steve Jobs bathing his feet in the toilet water of the Apple restrooms to de-stress is an authorized account in the biography of Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. Steve Jobs was an innovator. He was a shrewd negotiator. He was reportedly not very nice in the office setting, and supposedly he enjoyed a bit of toilet water to calm his nerves. Maybe that's why he was so wound up all the time, because if my only way of decompressing and de-stressing was dipping my feet in the toilet, I think I'd be pretty upset too. And for Jobs' sake, I really hope that he at least checked to make sure that the previous Apple employee didn't leave him a special surprise. That is disgusting, but I'm leaving it in. Taylor Swift. Some people love to fly. Some people are scared to fly. And some people fly to get lunch. I'll be honest, excessive flying is something that everybody on this list is very likely guilty of. I haven't confirmed, so I won't say is, but very likely. To make this video fun and entertaining, I'm gonna pin it on one person who's kind of a meme for it. Taylor Swift. In 2023 alone, Taylor Swift took over 170 flights. And within that year, over those 170 flights, across Swift's 2 private jets, she flew a total of 178,000 miles, which is equivalent to flying around the entire globe 7 times. Which, when you put it that way, honestly doesn't sound that much, but the number of flights and sheer miles is pretty crazy. On top of this, she caught a lot of backlash when she took a 13-minute flight from one part of St. Louis to the other. Literally 13 minutes. And assuming there was only mild traffic, driving the same route would have only been about 30 minutes, saving a total of 17 minutes experience by flying. I get why flying is popular. When you're busy and important and have stuff to do, it makes a lot more sense to fly places than take alternative means. But it's just crazy to see how far this will go and how often people will fly and how short of flights people are willing to take. At this point, I'm convinced if Taylor could take a flight to cross the road, she probably would. I'll admit, this example isn't really that crazy at all. It's pretty common, but I feel like we needed a bit of a palate cleanse after Mr. Jobs' toilet fiasco. And while we're on the topic of live performers, I have something that you're either gonna find really cool or really odd. Jack Ma. Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, the Chinese e-commerce behemoth, is actually a dedicated live performer and a Michael Jackson impersonator. It is well documented that at the annual Alibaba parties, Jack Ma will not only dress up as Michael Jackson, but also perform as Michael Jackson on stage for the entire company. He's only impersonated Michael Jackson once, to my knowledge, but he has consistently performed for the company every time with passion. It's cool to see. Imagine you just worked for this random company. Like, imagine if you worked for Amazon, you worked in the warehouse, and then there was like this Amazon Christmas party. You're like, okay, I'll go. And then you go there, and then Bezos is on stage pretending to be Drake. Maybe not Drake, and then Bezos is on stage just doing an Elvis impression. Honestly, I respect the hustle. And this just goes to show, no matter how old you are or how much money you have, rock stars are always cool. And while we're talking about rock stars, let's discuss somebody who was, at least for a while, married to one and probably thinks they are one too. I'm talking about Elon Musk. And why is he so high up on this list? What exactly did he do that was so diabolical? What is his sinister hobby? Well, that should be obvious. He is a goth girl enthusiast. I know, illegal in most states and a crime that is in most cases unrecoverable. But when you're the richest man in the world, you can survive the goth girlfriend experience, something not many of us are able to do. On a serious note, Musk is also on the forefront of billionaires that are now astronauts and literal space agencies. Musk obviously has SpaceX, but he's not alone in his space endeavor. Richard Branson, who has Virgin Galactic, and Jeff Bezos, who has Blue Origin, are keeping Musk company in the billionaire spaceman category. And yeah, there's others, but these are the main ones for sure. I totally forgot to mention this earlier too, but Bezos is literally like that space cowboy meme from Family Guy. Like, look at this picture from Family Guy and then look at Bezos. Like, dude, the cowboy hat in the spacesuit is honestly iconic. And totally laughable too. As strange as Musk's obsession is with occupying Mars, his company SpaceX is honestly doing a lot of good. And currently, at the time of making this video, they're the reason why astronauts are able to come home. Due to Boeing's latest failure, astronauts have been stranded on the International Space Station way longer than anticipated. And if SpaceX wasn't in the picture, these stranded astronauts would have to wait a lot longer than they currently are. Love these guys or hate these guys, I think that having a focus on space travel is important and noble. You can definitely argue that attention can be put elsewhere, and you're not wrong, but I don't think that nullifies the importance of this as well. He also basically views having kids as a hobby and likes living in a tiny box, so yeah, goth girls will do it to you, man. It's also been reported that he just skips breakfast and eats a Mars bar, which I definitely think is a metaphor, but also goes to show that this dude literally lives like a child. If I just explained his habits, you'd probably assume he was a child. Like, think about it. If I said, hey, I'm gonna introduce you to somebody who eats candy for breakfast, likes living in a small box, likes to jump up and down, and laughs like a maniac, you'd probably assume I was about to introduce you to a toddler. But nope, he's actually the richest man in the entire world. For our next few entries, I'm gonna be easing us into some less funny and more serious topics. I'll start this transition with Bill Gates, someone who's done a lot of good things and a lot of questionable things too. Something he's really known for is his computer skills. Something that he's not necessarily known for is his use of his computer skills back in his school days. Bill Gates is reported to have actually hacked and tweaked the code on his computer's scheduling program to put him in all girls classes to increase his chances of getting dates. View this how you want, but it's definitely odd at the very least. And manipulative wouldn't be an unfair word to use. He likely resorted to this because his other methods of swooning girls probably didn't work that well. For the longest time, his party trick that he did on national television quite often was just jumping over office chairs, which is kind of cool, especially for somebody of his physique and, I guess, career path. But it's definitely not that cool where it's worth doing every opportunity you get. Cool gimmick, but I don't know if it was getting him all the ladies he wanted. I think he was better off sticking to dancing. Just look at him busted down at Best Buy. That's totally not somebody who looks kinda like him. That's definitely him. And with that, we're on to our final entry. And I know this video has been really fun and light up until this point with a lot of jokes, but this last entry is no laughing matter. You saw the thumbnail, and I'm sure most of you are waiting for it. Our last entry is Sean Combs, also known as P. Diddy. Without going into detail, because I honestly don't think it's in good taste to go into details on such a serious case in a video that I've kept pretty lighthearted, but I did think it was worth mentioning the sheer depravity of this specific individual and also others in his position. In recent news, there has been a lot of famous examples of rich and powerful people taking advantage of people and doing unspeakable things. And I wish that this is something that was unheard of, but unfortunately it's not. And although I can't begin to wrap my head around why somebody would ever want to do this to people, it is theorized that these people crave power. They crave control. The egomaniac tendencies that has allowed them to create success is also the same mindset that is allowing them to justify hurting and abusing people, which is disgusting. This isn't something that's exclusive to billionaires or rich people, but when this sort of despicable behavior is participated in amongst the elites, it's definitely at a different level where it can go on for much longer, affect more people, and be hidden much better, and fought much better in court. I could easily joke about the 1,000 bottles of baby oil and the freak-offs talked about in this case, but I think the situation is much more serious than that. And if you're looking for information on it, honestly, this isn't the video for it, but it was definitely worth mentioning, especially with how current it is. Do I just believe that everybody who's rich and is a billionaire or is ultra wealthy instantly evil? I don't. I honestly don't. What I do believe, though, is that money allows people access and resources like nothing else. And if you are an evil or depraved or degenerate person, this money will allow you to fulfill your darkest fantasies. And as we saw on this list, it's not extremely unheard of, but there is still so much good in this world, and there are so many people that do good with their money and have earned their money doing good things.